The cherubim have been guarding God's most sacred spaces since the very beginning of time, yet most people have never heard their complete story. From the moment humanity was banished from paradise, these extraordinary beings have stood watch, not as the cute cherubs of art, but as living symbols of God's holiness and power. Tonight, you're in exactly the right place to finally understand who they truly are. As your eyes grow heavy and your breathing slows, I'll share every appearance, every vision, every glimpse Scripture gives us of these celestial guardians, weaving their tale into a tapestry perfect for peaceful slumber. But before you get comfortable, consider hitting that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Your support means we can continue producing content to help you unwind and rest easier. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is. We'd love to hear from you. So without further ado, let's get started, shall we? The first beings. In the beginning, before time counted its first hour, before stars learned to shine, there were beings of light and power dwelling in the presence of the Almighty. These were not ordinary angels, not simple messengers sent on divine errands. These were the cherubim, creatures of majesty and mystery, guardians of the sacred, keepers of the divine throne. The word itself whispers ancient secrets. Cherubim, in Hebrew cheruvim, possibly meaning to guard or to cover. Some scholars trace it back to Akkadian, where similar beings called Karibu served as divine protectors. But etymology only scratches the surface of their true nature. Scripture introduces us to cherubim in the 3rd chapter of Genesis, though their presence likely stretches back to creation's dawn. They emerge not as bit players in the cosmic drama, but as central figures in humanity's most pivotal moment. After Adam and Eve taste forbidden fruit, after innocence shatters like morning dew, God places cherubim at Eden's gates. Their first biblical appearance links them forever to boundaries, between paradise and exile, between divine and human, between what was and what could have been. These beings possess intelligence that spans creation's breadth. They understand God's will without explanation, execute his commands without question. Unlike humans who stumble through moral choices, cherubim align perfectly with divine purpose. They are not learning creatures, but knowing ones, not seeking truth, but embodying it. Ancient texts suggest cherubim existed before the physical universe took shape. While God spoke galaxies into being, cherubim already surrounded his throne. They witnessed light's first victory over darkness, heard the morning stars sing together, felt the foundations of the earth settle into place. They are creation's elder siblings, present at the birth of all things. Their nature differs from other heavenly beings. Angels serve as messengers, carrying God's word across vast distances. Seraphim burn with purifying fire, crying, "Holy, holy, holy," around the throne. But cherubim function as living symbols of God's presence itself. Where they appear, heaven touches earth. Where they spread their wings, sacred space unfolds. The ancient world knew such beings well. Mesopotamian temples housed winged creatures called lamassu, part human, part animal, part divine. Egyptian art depicted winged guardians protecting sacred spaces. But biblical cherubim transcend these ancient parallels. They are not merely symbolic, but actual, not just artistic, but alive. Jewish tradition holds that cherubim possess 4 faces, 4 wings, hands like humans, and feet like burnished bronze. They move with lightning speed, their wings creating sounds like mighty waters or vast armies on the march. Yet they can also hover in perfect stillness, as quiet as prayer, as motionless as deep meditation. Their intelligence operates on levels humans cannot fathom. They understand mysteries that puzzle the wisest philosophers, grasp truths that escape the most brilliant theologians. They know God's thoughts before he speaks them, sense his intentions before he acts. This knowledge brings no pride, only deeper humility. The more they understand divine majesty, the more they recognize their position as servants. Some wonder if cherubim experience emotions. Do they feel joy at creation's beauty, sorrow at human rebellion, love for the God they serve? Scripture hints at their passionate devotion, but reveals little about their inner lives. Perhaps their emotions run too deep for human comprehension, like ocean currents far beneath surface waves. Their bodies, if bodies they have, blend material and spiritual elements. They can appear physical enough to wield flaming swords, yet spiritual enough to transcend normal space and time. They inhabit dimensions beyond human perception while remaining intensely present in our world. This dual nature makes them perfect guardians of thresholds, perfect protectors of sacred boundaries. Throughout biblical history, cherubim appear at moments of supreme importance. They guard Eden's gate. They overshadow the mercy seat. They fill Ezekiel's visions with storm and fire. They never arrive by accident or appear for casual purposes. Their presence signals divine activity, heaven breaking into earthly affairs. Unlike humans who must choose between good and evil, cherubim embody goodness itself. Sin cannot touch them because their nature aligns completely with divine will. They are incapable of rebellion, unable to choose wrongly. This sinlessness makes them ideal guardians of holiness, perfect protectors of divine presence. Their wings speak of swift obedience, ready movement at God's command. Their multiple faces suggest complete awareness, seeing all directions simultaneously. Their burning appearance reflects divine glory, the light that streams from God's throne. Every aspect of their being serves divine purposes. As we begin this journey through cherubim lore, we encounter beings of profound mystery. They bridge heaven and earth, time and eternity, the known and unknowable. They remind us that reality extends far beyond human experience, that invisible realms teem with purposeful life. In their presence, we glimpse the awesome majesty surrounding God's throne, the celestial order that upholds all creation. The flaming sword Eden stood perfect in the evening light, its rivers flowing like liquid crystal, its trees heavy with fruit that never fell. But perfection had been pierced. Trust had been broken. Humanity's first home was now humanity's first loss, and the gates that once opened to welcome now stood closed in judgment. The scene unfolds with terrible beauty. Adam and Eve, clothed now in skins instead of glory, walk toward Eden's eastern gate for the last time. Behind them lies the garden, where they walked with God in the cool of the day, where every tree was pleasant to sight and good for food, where the tree of life stood offering its precious gift. Ahead lies a world of thorns and sweat, of pain and death, of dreams deferred and hopes deferred. But they do not walk alone into exile. God himself makes their garments, his hands working with divine tenderness to cover their shame. Even in judgment, mercy flows. Even in banishment, love endures. The Creator who must exile his creatures still provides for their needs, still protects them from greater harm. The eastern gate of Eden becomes humanity's first glimpse of supernatural power. Here God stations the cherubim, not as decoration but as guardians, not as symbols but as sentries. They appear in their full glory, beings of living fire and terrible beauty, their presence making the air itself seem sacred. Between them, or perhaps as part of them, flames a sword unlike any weapon forged by human hands. This blade burns without fuel, cuts without touching, moves with its own intelligence. The Hebrew text calls it the flame of a sword that turned every way, suggesting constant motion, ceaseless vigilance. It wheels and pivots, creating barriers of fire that shift and dance but never weaken. This is no ordinary flame. Fire in Scripture often represents God's presence, the burning bush that was not consumed, the pillar of fire that led Israel through wilderness nights, the tongues of flame that descended at Pentecost. The flaming sword carries divine authority, burns with holy power. It is less a weapon than a manifestation of God's own nature, his holiness made visible. The cherubim do not wield this sword as human warriors might. They are the sword in some mysterious way. Their very presence creates the barrier. Their obedience to divine command becomes the flame that blocks the path. They embody God's will to prevent fallen humanity from eating from the tree of life and living forever in their corrupted state. Imagine approaching that gate as Adam or Eve might have, drawn by memories of paradise lost. The familiar path winds through increasingly strange terrain. The air grows thick with power. Light begins to bend and shimmer. Then the cherubim come into view. Not clearly at first, but as movements in the flame, as shapes within the burning. Their faces might be human, but their eyes hold knowledge too vast for mortal minds. Their forms might be familiar, but their presence weighs like the atmosphere of another world. They do not speak threats or issue warnings. Their very existence is both threat and warning, their silence more eloquent than any words. The flaming sword moves with hypnotic rhythm. Sometimes it sweeps in great arcs, covering the entire approach to the tree of life. Sometimes it splits into multiple blades, creating a labyrinth of fire through which no path can be found. Always it burns, always it turns, always it guards. This scene has haunted human imagination for millennia. Artists have painted it, poets have sung it, dreamers have envisioned it in countless variations. But the reality surpasses all artistic attempts. Here stands the first supernatural barrier in human history, the first glimpse of powers beyond earthly comprehension. The tree of life still grows in Eden's heart, its fruit still gleaming with promise. But that promise now carries danger. Humanity in its fallen state cannot safely partake of eternal life. To live forever while corrupted by sin would be curse, not blessing. The cherubim guard humanity from its own desperate desire, protect people from the very thing they think they want most. Some traditions suggest the flaming sword represents God's word itself, cutting, piercing, dividing between soul and spirit. Others see it as the law that came later through Moses, revealing sin and bearing the way to righteousness. Still others interpret it as the gospel that would one day provide safe passage back to the tree of life. The cherubim themselves remain enigmatic. Do they feel compassion for the exiled humans? Do they understand the tragedy unfolding? Or do they simply serve, perfect in their obedience, unwavering in their purpose? Their emotional lives remain hidden behind flame and glory. As centuries pass, the flaming sword continues its ceaseless watch. Empires rise and fall, civilizations bloom and wither, but the cherubim remain at their posts. They do not grow weary or lose focus. They do not wonder if their vigil serves any purpose. They simply guard as they were commanded to guard. The eastern gate of Eden becomes humanity's first lesson in the nature of holiness. God's presence brings both blessing and danger, both life and death. To approach the divine, unprepared means destruction. To seek God's gifts without God's permission brings judgment. The cherubim teach these truths without words, through their burning presence alone. Yet even in this scene of exile and judgment, hope flickers. The tree of life still grows. The way back exists, though it remains blocked. And the cherubim who guard it are servants of the same God who promised that the woman's seed would one day crush the serpent's head. Their swords bar the way now, but swords can be lowered when the time is right. Heavenly architecture. When God chose to dwell among his people, he did not leave the design to human imagination. Every thread, every golden detail, every sacred dimension carried heavenly significance. The tabernacle and later the temple became earthly copies of celestial realities, and cherubim filled both with their mysterious presence. Moses climbed Mount Sinai through clouds thick with divine glory. For 40 days and nights he dwelt in God's presence, receiving not just commandments, but blueprints for sacred space. The instructions came with divine precision: how long, how wide, how high, which woods to use, which metals to fashion, which colors to weave into fabric. Nothing was left to chance or personal preference. The cherubim appeared throughout these sacred plans, woven into the very fabric of worship. They were not afterthoughts or decorative additions, but integral elements of heaven's architecture made manifest on earth. Their images would surround the Israelites as they approached God, reminding them of the supernatural realm that pressed close against their own. The innermost veil of the tabernacle blazed with cherubim figures worked in blue and purple and scarlet. Master craftsmen, filled with divine spirit, embroidered these beings into the fabric with threads of gold. The work required skill beyond normal human ability, artistry inspired by the same God who crafted the original cherubim from light and flame. These embroidered guardians were not static images, but seemed to move within the weave, to watch with eyes that shifted as priests passed by. The gold threads caught lamplight and seemed to flicker with their own fire. Visitors reported feeling observed, not by mere artwork, but by presences dwelling within the artistic representation. The curtains that divided holy space from common space featured similar cherubim designs. They stood as sentries in thread and precious metal guardians woven into the barriers between earthly and divine. To pass these curtains meant entering increasingly sacred territory, moving closer to the realm where cherubim naturally dwelt. But the most magnificent cherubim crowned the Ark of the Covenant itself. Here, craftsmen worked not with thread, but with pure gold, hammering out two figures that faced each other across the mercy seat. These were not small decorations, but substantial presences. their wings stretching to touch above the sacred box that held God's covenant with his people. The golden cherubim possessed lifelike detail despite being crafted from precious metal. Their faces showed both majesty and mercy, strength and gentleness. Their wings curved protectively over the mercy seat, creating a canopy of gold that suggested divine covering, heavenly shelter for the tablets of law below. Between these golden wings, God promised to meet with Moses and speak with him. The space above the mercy seat became Earth's closest approximation to the divine throne room. Here, the invisible God chose to manifest his presence, speaking from the realm where living cherubim eternally served. The symbolism ran deeper than artistic beauty. Gold represented divine nature, incorruptible and precious. The cherubim's position above the law tablets suggested divine mercy covering human failure. Their wings, touching above the mercy seat, created a sacred canopy, a throne room where justice and compassion merged. When the tabernacle was complete and the glory of the Lord filled it, the embroidered and golden cherubim seemed to respond to their original inspiration. Priests reported seeing the fabric figures shift and shimmer, and the golden forms appear to breathe with subtle life. Art had become a window into heavenly reality. Solomon's temple expanded these cherubim themes into even grander architecture. The Holy of Holies housed two massive cherubim carved from olive wood and overlaid with gold. These giants stood 15 feet tall, their wings spanning the entire width of the inner sanctuary. One wing of each cherub touched the temple wall, while their inner wings met in the center, creating a golden canopy over the ark below. The temple walls themselves bloomed with cherubim carvings, their forms repeated in endless variation throughout the sacred structure. No surface remained undecorated, no space lacked their protective presence. Visitors entered a world where cherubim watched from every angle, where heaven's guardians maintained constant vigil over earthly worship. The bronze sea in the temple courtyard rested on 12 bronze oxen, their forms echoing the ox face of Ezekiel's cherubim. The water basin itself sparkled with engravings of cherubim and palm trees, creating a scene of Eden restored, paradise regained through sacred architecture. These artistic representations served multiple purposes beyond mere decoration. They educated worshippers about heavenly realities, reminding them that invisible realms surrounded their visible world. They created atmosphere appropriate for divine encounter, spaces where earthly and celestial could safely meet. The cherubim images also functioned as warnings and promises. Warnings because they recalled Eden's flaming sword, the barriers between holy and common, the danger of approaching God unprepared. Promises because they suggested divine protection, heavenly guardianship over those who sought God with proper reverence. Craftsmen who worked on these sacred projects reported extraordinary experiences. Skills seemed enhanced beyond normal ability. Inspiration flowed like water from an inexhaustible spring. Some spoke of dreams where they saw the heavenly originals of what they labored to create, visions that guided their hands and shaped their understanding. The destruction of Solomon's temple by Babylonian armies marked the end of this golden age of cherubim architecture. The carved guardians went up in flames. The golden figures were melted down or carried into exile, but their memory endured, preserved in scripture and sacred tradition, awaiting the day when an even greater temple would arise, not made with hands, but eternal in the heavens. Ezekiel's vision begins. By the river Shebar in Babylon, far from Jerusalem's ruined temple, a priest named Ezekiel received visions that would reshape human understanding of divine majesty. The year was 593 before Christ. The exile weighed heavy on Hebrew hearts, and many wondered if God had abandoned his people. Then the heavens opened, and Ezekiel saw what no human eyes had witnessed since Moses on the mountain. The vision began with wind, not the gentle breeze of evening or the steady blow of seasonal change, but a tempest that seemed to carry the very breath of eternity. This wind came from the north, unusual for that region, bearing something unprecedented in its fierce embrace. Ancient Jewish thought often associated the north with mystery and divine dwelling. From this direction of secrets, the storm approached. Within the windstorm, fire flickered and danced, but not ordinary flame. This fire contained itself, swirling in patterns that defied natural law. It burned without consuming fuel, blazed without destroying what surrounded it. The fire seemed alive, conscious, moving with purpose rather than random energy. Around it, brightness gathered like concentrated daylight, creating a nimbus of glory that hurt to observe directly. From the heart of this supernatural storm, Ezekiel glimpsed something that words could barely contain: the likeness of four living creatures. They emerged not gradually but suddenly, as if stepping through a veil between worlds. Their appearance challenged every category of earthly life, combining elements that nature kept separate, blending forms that seemed impossible to unite. Each creature possessed four faces, four wings, and hands like human hands beneath their wings. But these were no ordinary hands. They glowed like burnished bronze heated in a furnace, capable of both tender touch and terrible power. Their feet resembled calves' feet, suggesting strength and sure footing, but they too gleamed like polished bronze, reflecting the fire that surrounded them. The faces defied simple description. Each creature bore the face of a man, looking forward with intelligence and nobility. To the right side, the face of a lion gazed with royal authority and fierce courage. On the left, an ox face reflected patient strength and sacrificial service. Behind, the face of an eagle soared with sharp vision and swift flight. Four faces, four perspectives, four aspects of divine nature reflected in living form. Their wings moved with coordinated precision, two wings of each creature joining with their companions' wings, creating a canopy of feathers that whispered of unity and purpose. The remaining two wings covered their bodies, suggesting both modesty and mystery, hiding aspects of their nature that even this unprecedented vision could not fully reveal. They moved as one being, though they were four, their motion straightforward without turning. Where their spirits directed them to go, they went, needing no consultation or coordination. Their unity was perfect, their purpose singular. They embodied the divine will without question or hesitation. Fire moved among them, flashing back and forth like lightning contained within their midst. This was not destructive fire but creative flame, the same energy that spoke worlds into existence, that burned in the bush before Moses, that would later rest on the apostles' heads as tongues of flame. It was the fire of divine presence, terrible and beautiful, dangerous and life-giving. The sound of their wings filled the air like rushing water, like the voice of the Almighty, like the noise of a great army. Yet within this mighty sound, careful listeners could detect harmonies of perfect praise, celestial music that earthly instruments could never reproduce. Their very movement created worship, their flight sang glory to the one who sent them. Ezekiel watched in wonder and terror as these beings moved with lightning speed, appearing and disappearing like flashes of fire. They seemed bound by no physical laws, capable of instant travel across vast distances, present wherever their mission required them to be. Time and space bent around their passage like water around a ship's prow. The prophet struggled to find words for what defied description. He used phrases like the appearance of and the likeness of, acknowledging that human language could only approximate the reality he witnessed. These beings existed beyond normal categories, transcending the boundaries that separate earth from heaven, material from spiritual, known from unknowable. As the vision continued, Ezekiel realized he was witnessing the cherubim mentioned throughout Scripture, the same beings who guarded Eden's gate, who overshadowed the mercy seat, who surrounded God's throne in heavenly places. But seeing them in living motion transformed his understanding completely. They were not static guardians, but dynamic forces, not decorative elements, but active agents of divine will. The fire among them pulsed with life and energy, suggesting that these beings drew their power directly from divine source. They needed no rest, no sustenance except the will of God. They were sustained by the same energy that maintains galaxies in their courses, that keeps atoms dancing in their eternal patterns. Their four faces spoke of completeness: humanity's intelligence, the lion's courage, the ox's strength, the eagle's vision. Together, they represented the fullness of created life, all aspects of existence gathered into beings of supernatural glory. They were creation's representatives before the throne, carrying the prayers and praises of all living things. The vision challenged everything Ezekiel thought he knew about heaven and earth, about the nature of divine beings, about the relationship between visible and invisible realms. Here were creatures that belonged fully to heaven, yet moved freely in earthly space, beings of pure spirit who could manifest physical effects, guardians of holiness who radiated welcome rather than threat. Wheels within wheels. As Ezekiel's vision deepened, something even more mysterious appeared beside the four living creatures. Wheels touched the earth near each cherub, not ordinary wheels that might support earthly chariots, but structures that defied every law of mechanics and motion. These wheels existed at the very edge of human comprehension, where description breaks down and language surrenders to wonder. Each wheel appeared to intersect another wheel at right angles, creating forms that seemed impossible yet undeniably real. When one wheel moved forward, the other moved sideways, allowing motion in any direction without turning. They could travel north, south, east, or west with equal ease, their movement unrestricted by the limitations that bind earthly vehicles to single directions. The wheels towered high and terrible, their rims filled with eyes all around their circumference. These were not decorative eyes or symbolic representations, but actual organs of sight that watched and observed everything within their view. They saw the past and future as clearly as the present, perceived hidden thoughts as easily as visible actions. Nothing escaped their gaze, nothing remained hidden from their sight. The rims themselves sparkled like precious stones, possibly beryl or chrysolite, catching and reflecting the divine fire that blazed among the cherubim. The wheels seemed crafted from concentrated light, solid yet translucent, material yet spiritual. They embodied paradox, heavy enough to touch earth, yet light enough to soar through heavens. When the cherubim moved, the wheels moved with them, rising from the earth or settling upon it as their supernatural companions directed. The wheels possessed no independent will, but responded perfectly to the spirits of the living creatures. Where the cherubim's spirits chose to go, there the wheels went also, demonstrating perfect unity between different orders of celestial beings. The sound of their motion joined the symphony of wings and fire, a deep rumbling that spoke of immense power held in perfect control. Like distant thunder or grinding millstones, the wheels announced divine movement across both earthly and heavenly realms. Their passage marked moments when eternity intersected time, when heaven touched earth. These wheels represented mobility beyond anything earthly minds could grasp. They were not bound by roads or limited by terrain. Mountains could not block their path. Oceans could not slow their progress. They moved through dimensions that humans barely comprehend, traveling instantly between the throne room of God and the farthest corners of creation. The eyes within their rims suggested omniscience, the divine ability to see and know all things simultaneously. Past, present, and future lay equally open to their gaze. They witnessed the first dawn and the final sunset, observed every sparrow's fall, and numbered every hair on human heads. Their sight penetrated disguises, pierced deceptions, revealed truth in all its naked glory. Ezekiel watched as the wheels demonstrated their supernatural nature. They could shrink to pass through narrow spaces or expand to fill vast areas. They could become light as air or solid as stone, transparent as crystal or opaque as metal. Their substance responded to divine will, adapting to whatever purpose God required. The intersection of wheel within wheel created a sense of completeness and perfection. No direction remained uncovered. No angle of approach stayed unguarded. They could respond instantly to any divine command, move immediately in any required direction. Their design embodied the divine attributes of omnipresence and omnipotence made visible. Some scholars suggest these wheels represent the natural world itself, creation serving as God's chariot, the universe moving at divine direction. Others see them as symbols of divine providence, the hidden wheels of history that turn according to God's eternal plan. Still others interpret them as literal vehicles of supernatural transportation, allowing heavenly beings to traverse the cosmos. The eyes within the rim spoke to divine knowledge that penetrates all mysteries. Nothing could be hidden from those countless watchful eyes. They saw into human hearts, perceived angelic thoughts, witnessed the secret counsels of nations, and the private prayers of individuals. Their gaze was both comforting and terrifying, comforting to those who sought righteousness, terrifying to those who preferred darkness. The wheel's ability to move in any direction without turning suggested divine freedom from limitations that bind created beings. While humans must choose between alternatives, divine wisdom encompasses all possibilities simultaneously. While earthly rulers must focus on single problems, divine attention embraces all concerns at once. The barrel like sparkle of their construction indicated precious value and supernatural beauty. These were not crude mechanisms, but artistic masterpieces, functional sculptures that combined utility with aesthetic perfection. Every eye was precisely placed, every curve perfectly formed, every intersection geometrically exact. As Ezekiel continued watching, the wheels revealed their relationship to the divine throne above them. They served as the foundation for God's mobile sanctuary, the base upon which his glory could move throughout creation. They made possible divine visitation, allowing the transcendent God to become immanent without abandoning his transcendence. The prophet realized he was witnessing divine omnipresence in action, God's ability to be everywhere simultaneously without being contained by any location. The wheels with their eyes and their intersecting motion represented this mystery made visible, this impossible possibility demonstrated before human eyes. The vision of wheels within wheels challenged human assumptions about divine nature and divine action. God was not confined to temples or limited to specific locations. His throne could move. His presence could travel. His glory could appear wherever his purposes required. The wheels made this mobility possible, serving as the vehicles of divine visitation. This supernatural transportation system operated by different laws than earthly vehicles. It ran on spiritual energy rather than physical fuel, navigated by divine will rather than earthly maps. Its destination was always perfect, its timing always precise, its purpose always accomplished. Faces and symbols. The four faces of each cherub held mysteries that theologians would ponder for millennia. Each face represented not merely an animal or human form, but entire categories of existence, divine attributes made visible, creation's own language speaking of its creator's nature. To understand these faces was to glimpse the very character of God himself. The human face gazed forward with intelligence and wisdom, representing humanity's unique position in creation as beings made in God's image. This face possessed the nobility of conscious thought, the dignity of moral choice, the beauty of souls capable of communion with their Creator. It spoke of reason and relationship, of minds that could know God and hearts that could love Him. In ancient Near Eastern thought, the human face symbolized the pinnacle of earthly creation, beings who could think, choose, create, and worship. The cherubim bore this face to represent all rational creatures, all souls capable of understanding divine truth and responding to divine love. It was the face that could weep with sorrow or shine with joy, express gratitude or cry for mercy. To the right, the lion's face burned with royal authority and fierce courage. Lions were kings of beasts, rulers of the animal kingdom, symbols of strength that knew no fear. This face represented God's sovereign majesty, his power over all creation, his authority that none could challenge. It was the face of divine kingship, of judgment that could not be escaped, of strength that could not be overcome. The lion face also spoke of protective fury, the wrath that defends righteousness and destroys evil. Like a lion defending its cubs, God's anger arose not from petty irritation, but from deep love for what was good and beautiful and true. This face could roar with terrifying power when holiness was threatened or justice was denied. On the left side, the ox face reflected patient strength and sacrificial service. Oxen were beasts of burden, creatures that served faithfully without complaint, animals whose strength made human civilization possible. This face represented God's willingness to bear the burdens of his creation, to serve even while ruling, to sacrifice for those he loved. The ox face suggested endurance that never failed, strength that never weakened, service that never ceased. It spoke of divine faithfulness that continued through humanity's worst failures, of love that persisted despite repeated betrayal, of grace that flowed even when undeserved and unwelcome. Behind, the eagle's face soared with swift vision and heavenly perspective. Eagles flew higher than other birds, saw farther than earthly eyes could reach, moved with speed that defied earthly limitations. This face represented God's transcendence, his ability to see all things from heavenly viewpoint, his swift action when intervention was required. The eagle face embodied divine omniscience, knowledge that penetrated all mysteries, sight that pierced all disguises, understanding that grasped all complexities. It was the face that saw end from beginning, that understood purposes hidden from finite minds, that guided history toward destinations beyond human comprehension. Together, these four faces created a complete portrait of divine nature as it related to creation. Humanity's intelligence, the lion's authority, the ox's service, the eagle's transcendence, all were aspects of the one God who ruled with wisdom, power, love, and perfect knowledge. Early Christian interpreters saw profound connections between these faces in the four Gospels. Matthew's Gospel emphasized Jesus as king, connecting to the lion's royal nature. Mark portrayed him as servant, echoing the ox's sacrificial spirit. Luke highlighted his humanity, reflecting the human face's dignity and compassion. John revealed his divine nature, soaring like the eagle into heavenly mysteries. Jewish mystical tradition found in these faces the four primary categories of created beings: humans representing rational creatures, lions embodying wild animals, oxen symbolizing domestic animals, eagles speaking for birds of the air. The cherubim thus carried before God's throne representatives of all living things, ensuring that creation's voice reached heaven's councils. The arrangement of faces also held significance. Looking forward with human intelligence, ruling with lion authority, serving with ox patience, soaring with eagle vision. This was the divine pattern for leadership, the heavenly model for authority exercised in love. Some traditions suggested that individual cherubim might emphasize one face over others at different times, allowing their appearance to shift according to divine purposes. When mercy was needed, the human face might become prominent. When judgment was required, the lion's visage might blaze forth. When service was called for, the ox nature might dominate. When transcendent action was necessary, the eagle aspect might soar to the foreground. The faces never contradicted each other, but worked in perfect harmony, just as God's attributes never conflicted despite their apparent tensions. Divine justice and mercy, transcendence and immanence, authority and service, all blended perfectly in the cherubim's appearance as they did in God's own character. Medieval angelologists debated whether these faces were simultaneously visible or appeared in sequence, whether they were literal descriptions or symbolic representations, whether cherubim in heaven actually possessed these forms, or whether Ezekiel saw them adapted for human understanding. But all agreed that the faces revealed profound truths about divine nature and divine activity. The faces reminded observers that God could not be reduced to single attributes or simple categories. He was simultaneously transcendent and immanent, powerful and gentle, just and merciful, sovereign and serving. The cherubim embodied these seeming contradictions, demonstrating that divine perfection included rather than excluded complexity. As guardians of divine holiness, the cherubim's faces warned that approaching God required recognition of his complete character. One could not appeal only to divine mercy while ignoring divine justice, could not claim divine love while rejecting divine authority. The four faces insisted on acknowledging the full reality of divine nature. Thrones and thrones. Above the cherubim and their mysterious wheels, Ezekiel's vision revealed something even more awesome: the appearance of a throne that seemed crafted from heaven's own light. This was not merely furniture for divine rest, but the very seat of cosmic authority, the center from which all creation received its orders, the focal point where justice and mercy met in perfect balance. The throne appeared as a sapphire stone, blue as deep ocean waters or cloudless summer sky. But this was no ordinary gemstone. It blazed with inner fire, translucent yet solid, beautiful beyond earthly comparison. The sapphire spoke of divine transcendence, of beauty that exceeded human imagination, of value that surpassed all earthly treasures. Ancient traditions held that sapphire represented divine wisdom and divine faithfulness. Its blue color suggested heaven itself, the realm where God dwelt in unapproachable light. Its hardness spoke of unchanging divine nature, qualities that neither time nor circumstance could alter. Its clarity reflected divine truth that nothing could obscure or distort. Upon this throne sat the appearance of a man, though the figure blazed with fire and radiance that made direct observation impossible. From his waist upward, he appeared like gleaming metal filled with fire. From his waist downward, he seemed like fire itself, brilliant beyond description. Around him, brightness shone like a rainbow in clouds on a rainy day. This was the glory of the Lord, not God himself, for no one could see God and live, but the manifestation of divine presence that finite minds could bear. The human appearance suggested God's personal nature, his ability to relate to his creatures. The fire spoke of his holiness, the consuming power of absolute purity that burned away all imperfection. The rainbow around the throne recalled God's covenant with Noah, his promise never again to destroy the earth by flood. Even in this vision of cosmic authority and divine judgment, mercy's colors arced through the scene. The throne of justice was surrounded by reminders of divine faithfulness and love. The cherubim supported this throne, their wings creating a living canopy above their heads. Upon this firmament of feathered glory, the throne rested, not because God needed support, but because the cherubim were honored to serve as his throne bearers, privileged to carry the seat of cosmic authority wherever divine purposes required. This scene revealed what Jewish mystics would later call the Merkava, the divine chariot throne that could move throughout creation. Unlike earthly thrones that remained fixed in palace halls, God's throne was mobile, capable of appearing wherever divine presence was needed. The wheels, the cherubim, the throne itself formed a unified vehicle of supernatural authority. The mobility of the divine throne carried profound implications. God was not confined to any temple or limited to any location. His presence could visit earth without abandoning heaven, could dwell among people without being contained by them. The throne could descend to bring blessing or rise to execute judgment as divine wisdom directed. Ancient thrones represented more than seating. They embodied authority, power, the right to rule and judge. Kings sat on thrones to hear cases, issue decrees, receive tribute from subjects. But earthly thrones were pale shadows of this heavenly reality, crude imitations of the seat from which all legitimate authority flowed. The sapphire throne suggested divine righteousness that could not be corrupted or compromised. Unlike earthly rulers who might be swayed by bribes or influenced by favorites, the divine judge remained absolutely pure in his decisions. The throne's sapphire nature reflected this incorruptible justice, this perfect wisdom that always chose rightly. The fire that filled the figure on the throne spoke of divine holiness that consumed impurity wherever it was found. This was not the destructive fire of human anger, but the purifying flame of absolute goodness, burning away everything that contradicted divine nature. To approach this throne meant entering the presence of perfect holiness. Yet the human appearance of the figure offered hope to finite creatures. God chose to reveal himself in forms that humans could recognize, even if they could not fully comprehend. The anthropomorphic vision suggested divine personality, divine ability to know and love and communicate with created beings. The brightness surrounding the throne defied all earthly comparisons. It was not merely bright, but brightness itself, not simply radiant, but the source of all radiance. This light needed no external source because it was light in its purest form, illumination that revealed truth and banished all darkness. Ezekiel's vision established patterns that would echo through later biblical revelations. John's apocalyptic vision would show a similar throne surrounded by 4 living creatures, though his description added details that Ezekiel's account had left mysterious. Daniel would see the Ancient of Days taking his seat on a throne like flaming fire, its wheels like burning fire. The throne room became the template for understanding divine government. Here was the cosmic capital from which all authority flowed, the supreme court where all appeals would ultimately be heard, the executive mansion where divine decisions shaped the destiny of nations and individuals alike. Jewish tradition developed elaborate meditations on the Merkava throne, seeing it as the supreme mystery of divine revelation. To contemplate the throne was to approach the very heart of existence, to touch the source from which all reality emerged. Mystics sought visions of the throne, though such experiences carried both great blessing and great danger. The cherubim's role as throne bearers elevated their status beyond mere guardians or messengers. They participated directly in divine government, their strength supporting cosmic authority, their obedience enabling divine mobility. They were not simply creatures in God's service, but integral components of heaven's administration. Guardians of holiness. The cherubim's primary calling reaches deeper than guarding locations or protecting objects. They serve as living boundaries between the sacred and the common, breathing barriers that separate divine holiness from everything that might contaminate or corrupt it. Their very presence creates sacred space, transforms ordinary locations into holy ground where heaven and earth safely meet. Holiness itself defies simple definition. It encompasses moral purity, but extends far beyond ethical categories into realms of divine otherness that human language struggles to contain. Holy things are set apart, dedicated exclusively to divine purposes, removed from common use and protected from profane contact. The cherubim embody this separation, making holiness visible through their radiant presence. Their guardianship operates on multiple levels simultaneously. They protect divine holiness from contamination by sinful contact, but they also protect finite creatures from destruction by unlimited divine power. Their service flows in both directions, upward toward God and downward toward creation, creating safe meeting points where worship can occur without danger. At Eden's gate, cherubim prevented fallen humanity from accessing the tree of life while corrupted by sin. This was not merely punishment, but protection. To live forever in a fallen state would perpetuate suffering endlessly, making redemption impossible. The cherubim's flaming sword blocked the path to eternal misery disguised as eternal life. Above the mercy seat, golden cherubim created a sacred canopy where divine justice and mercy could meet. Their wings touched in perfect unity, suggesting harmony between divine attributes that humans often perceived as contradictory. Under their protection, God could dwell among sinful people without compromising his holiness or destroying them with his presence. The temple cherubim filled Solomon's sanctuary with reminders that worship required reverence. Approach to God demanded preparation. Their carved faces watched from every wall, their golden forms caught lamplight and seemed to move with living awareness. They created atmosphere appropriate for divine encounter, space where earthly and heavenly could safely intersect. Their guardianship extended beyond physical protection to include spiritual boundaries. They prevented unauthorized access to divine mysteries, ensured that sacred knowledge reached only those prepared to receive it safely. Like passwords protecting digital systems, cherubim verified proper credentials before allowing entry into increasingly holy spaces. The ancient world understood sacred boundaries intuitively. Temples had outer courts for common people, inner courts for priests, holy places for high priests alone. Each boundary represented increasing levels of holiness, greater nearness to divine presence. Cherubim enforced these distinctions, maintaining proper order in divine approach, but their role transcended mere exclusion. They also functioned as guides for those legitimately seeking divine encounter. Their presence indicated sacred space, warned of the need for proper preparation, suggested appropriate attitudes for divine approach. They were not cosmic bouncers, but heavenly ushers, directing traffic in the courts of God. The cherubim's protection worked both ways because divine holiness posed real danger to unprepared creatures. Like electrical power that could illuminate homes or electrocute, the careless divine presence brought either blessing or destruction, depending on the condition of those who encountered it. The cherubim regulated this power, ensuring safe contact between infinite and finite. Their guard duty never relaxed or weakened. Unlike human sentries who might grow tired or distracted, cherubim maintained perfect vigilance throughout eternities. Their attention never wandered, their dedication never faltered. They served as constant, unchanging barriers between holy and profane. The nature of their protection adapted to changing circumstances without compromising core principles. At Eden, they wielded flaming swords. In the tabernacle, they spread protecting wings. In Ezekiel's vision, they carried the divine throne. Their methods varied, but their purpose remained constant, preserving holiness while enabling legitimate access to divine presence. Their protective service extended to defending divine truth from distortion, divine worship from corruption, divine purposes from interference. They guarded not just physical spaces, but spiritual realities, not just sacred objects, but sacred principles. Their oversight covered the entire realm where divine and human intersected. Some traditions suggest that cherubim protect individual believers as well as corporate worship spaces. They stand guard over human hearts where God chooses to dwell, maintaining sacred space within redeemed souls. They protect the divine image in humanity from complete corruption, preserve the capacity for divine relationship even in fallen creatures. The boundaries they maintained were not arbitrary rules, but expressions of divine nature itself. God's holiness was not a quality he chose to possess, but an essential aspect of his being. The cherubim's guard duty reflected this necessity, protecting what could not be changed or compromised without destroying divine nature itself. Their vigilance created freedom rather than restricting it. By maintaining proper boundaries, they made safe approach to God possible for finite creatures. Like safety systems that allow humans to work with dangerous forces, cherubim enabled divine encounter without divine destruction. The peace they guarded was not mere absence of conflict, but positive harmony between divine and created realms. Their presence indicated zones where blessing flowed freely, where prayers found ready hearing, where divine and human wills could align without contradiction or threat. In the Holy of Holies, deep within the temple's heart, beyond the outer courts where crowds gathered, past the holy place where priests performed daily service, lay the most sacred space on earth, the Holy of Holies. Here, in perfect silence, broken only by the high priest's footsteps once each year, two golden cherubim kept eternal vigil over the Ark of the Covenant. These were not the small, decorative figures that modern imagination might envision, but massive sculptures that commanded the entire sacred chamber. Carved from olive wood and overlaid with pure gold, they stood 15 feet tall, their wingspans stretching from wall to wall of the inner sanctuary. Their presence filled the space with weight of glory, transforming mere architecture into a doorway to heaven itself. The craftsmen who shaped these cherubim worked under divine inspiration, their skills enhanced beyond normal human ability. Every curve of wing and detail of face emerged from hands guided by the same spirit who had breathed life into the first humans. The work required not just artistic skill, but spiritual sensitivity, ability to translate heavenly realities into earthly forms. The two cherubim faced each other across the golden mercy seat, their expressions serene yet alert, peaceful yet powerful. Their faces combined human intelligence with divine majesty, creating countenances that spoke of both intimate knowledge and cosmic authority. They looked not outward toward intruders, but inward toward each other and downward toward the sacred ark below. Their wings curved gracefully upward and inward, the tips touching above the mercy seat to create a golden canopy. This was no mere decorative element, but the earthly representation of God's throne room, the space where divine presence chose to dwell among his people. Between those golden wings, the invisible God made himself known to human servants. The mercy seat itself gleamed with the same pure gold as the cherubim who overshadowed it. Here, once each year, on the Day of Atonement, the high priest sprinkled sacrificial blood to cover the sins of Israel. The cherubim witnessed this sacred drama, their presence lending solemnity to humanity's most desperate need and God's most gracious provision. Beneath the mercy seat, within the ark itself, lay the stone tablets of the law, the very commandments written by God's finger on Mount Sinai. The golden pot of manna rested there as well, memorial of divine provision in wilderness wanderings. Aaron's rod that budded spoke of divine choice and authority. These treasures represented Israel's entire relationship with God, law, grace, and leadership. The cherubim's position above these sacred objects carried profound meaning. Their wings suggested divine mercy covering human failure, grace overshadowing judgment. The law that condemned found shelter under wings of gold, as if divine love transformed justice into opportunity for reconciliation rather than destruction. Light within the Holy of Holies came not from lamps or natural sources, but from the divine presence itself. The Shekinah glory, the visible manifestation of God's presence, rested between the cherubim's wings, illuminating the sacred space with radiance that no earthly source could produce. This light needed no fuel, cast no shadows, and never dimmed or flickered. The silence in this innermost chamber possessed quality unlike any earthly quiet. It was not mere absence of sound, but positive peace, the deep stillness that comes from perfect order and complete security. Within this silence, the cherubim maintained their vigil, their presence more eloquent than any words. Only one human being could enter this space, and only once each year. The high priest, bearing the blood of atonement and the names of Israel's 12 tribes, passed between the veil's cherubim embroidered curtains to stand before the living throne of God. Even then, he entered with trembling and bells attached to his garments so those outside could know he still lived. The high priest's annual entrance reenacted humanity's deepest longing to approach the divine presence without fear, to stand before God's throne and find acceptance rather than condemnation. The cherubim witnessed these encounters, their golden faces reflecting both divine holiness and human hope. When Solomon dedicated the temple, the glory of the Lord filled the Holy of Holies so powerfully that the priests could not continue their service. The cherubim seemed to come alive in that moment, their golden forms reflecting divine radiance, their wings appearing to flutter with supernatural movement. Heaven had descended to earth, and the cherubim marked the precise location of divine visitation. The destruction of the temple by Babylonian forces brought indescribable tragedy to Jewish faith. The cherubim went up in flames or were carried into exile. Their golden glory melted down or lost forever. The Holy of Holies stood empty, its sacred treasures scattered, its divine presence departed. Yet memory of the cherubim's vigil lived on, preserved in scripture and tradition. Some traditions suggest that before the temple's destruction, the cherubim turned to face each other in eternal embrace, symbolizing God's unchanging love for his people despite coming judgment. Others claim they wept golden tears that fell upon the mercy seat, divine sorrow at humanity's persistent rebellion mixed with hope for future restoration. The empty Holy of Holies became a symbol of humanity's deepest need, restored access to divine presence, renewed fellowship with the Creator, rebuilt bridges between heaven and earth. The cherubim's absent wings left a vacuum that only divine grace could fill, a silence that only divine love could break. But their memory pointed forward to greater realities. The earthly Holy of Holies was only a shadow of the true sanctuary in heaven, where living cherubim still surrounded the eternal throne. Their earthly vigil had ended, but their heavenly service continued uninterrupted, waiting for the day when earth and heaven would be united once again. Cherubim versus angels. In the vast hierarchy of heavenly beings, cherubim occupy a unique position that sets them apart from the angels most humans imagine when they think of divine messengers. Understanding these distinctions reveals the rich complexity of spiritual realms that stretch far beyond simple categories of good spirits versus evil ones. Angels, or malachim in Hebrew, derive their name from their primary function. They are messengers, sent ones, divine ambassadors carrying God's word to human recipients. Gabriel appears to Daniel and Mary bearing specific messages. Michael leads heavenly armies in cosmic warfare. Countless unnamed angels announce births, deliver warnings, provide guidance, and execute divine judgments throughout biblical history. These angelic messengers typically appear in human form, often so convincingly human that their supernatural nature remains hidden until they reveal themselves. They can eat meals with Abraham, wrestle with Jacob, speak with Joshua, or announce good news to shepherds. Their appearance generally comforts rather than terrifies, though their messages sometimes bring fear. Cherubim, by contrast, rarely function as messengers in biblical narratives. They do not bring announcements or deliver divine communications to human recipients. Instead, they serve as living symbols of divine presence itself, markers that indicate where heaven has touched earth, guardians who maintain the boundaries between sacred and common space. While angels often appear individually, one angel to Daniel, one to Mary, two to the women at Christ's tomb, cherubim typically appear in multiples. Two golden cherubim overshadow the mercy seat. Four living creatures surround Ezekiel's vision. Their plurality suggests completeness, corporate witness to divine glory, rather than individual mission. The physical descriptions differ dramatically as well. Angels can appear so human that their supernatural nature remains hidden. Cherubim possess forms that immediately declare their otherworldly origin. Multiple faces, wings, hands like burnished bronze, feet like calves' hooves. They cannot be mistaken for ordinary humans, even for a moment. Seraphim represent another distinct order of heavenly beings, appearing in Isaiah's temple vision with 6 wings and voices that cry, "Holy, holy, holy," around God's throne. Their name means burning ones, suggesting their primary association with divine holiness and purification. They touch Isaiah's lips with burning coals to cleanse his sin and prepare him for prophetic service. The seraphim's 6 wings distinguish them from cherubim's 4 wings. 2 wings cover their faces in reverence before divine glory, 2 cover their feet in modesty, and 2 enable flight in divine service. Their song of triple holiness establishes their role as worship leaders in heaven's courts, voices that declare divine perfection. Angels often interact extensively with humans, engaging in conversation, providing comfort, offering protection, sharing meals. The angel who appears to Gideon conducts a lengthy dialogue. The angel who ministers to Elijah provides food and encouragement. Angels seem designed for relationship with human beings, capable of understanding human needs and responding appropriately. Cherubim, however, rarely engage in direct communication with humans in biblical accounts. Their presence speaks without words. Their forms declare divine glory without explanation. They function more like living symbols than personal communicators, embodying truths too deep for human language to contain adequately. The mobility patterns also differ significantly. Angels travel from heaven to earth and back again, crossing between realms to accomplish specific missions. They appear suddenly, deliver their messages, and often disappear just as quickly. Their service involves movement between divine and human spheres. Cherubim appear more permanently stationed in their roles. They remain at Eden's gate throughout human history. They overshadow the mercy seat continuously. Even when they appear mobile in Ezekiel's vision, they move as a unified group carrying the divine throne rather than traveling as individual messengers on separate missions. The knowledge levels seem different as well. Angels sometimes appear to learn things through experience, to receive instructions for specific missions, to operate with particular assignments rather than universal knowledge. Gabriel explains to Daniel that his message was delayed by spiritual warfare, suggesting angels work within temporal limitations. Cherubim appear to possess knowledge that transcends ordinary angelic understanding. Their multiple faces suggest complete perspective. Their positioning around God's throne indicates access to divine counsels. Their role as throne bearers implies participation in cosmic governance rather than mere message delivery. The fear factor varies significantly between encounters. While angels often begin their communications with "fear not," suggesting their appearance can frighten humans, cherubim inspire awe of an entirely different magnitude. Ezekiel falls on his face in their presence. Moses cannot look directly at God between the cherubim. Their glory exceeds what human minds can safely process. Some traditions arrange these beings in hierarchical orders: cherubim and seraphim closest to God's throne, archangels governing major spiritual territories, ordinary angels serving as messengers and protectors. But Scripture provides no detailed organizational chart, leaving many questions about heavenly hierarchy unanswered. The distinctions matter because they reveal the complexity of spiritual reality, the richness of divine creativity in producing different types of conscious beings for different purposes. Understanding these differences prevents oversimplification of heavenly realms while deepening appreciation for the varied ways divine presence manifests in creation. Cherubim in art. Picture a massive winged bull with a human head carved from stone in ancient Babylon. These were the Lamassu, guardians of palace gates, ancestors to the cherubim we know today. Their wings spread wide across doorways, faces stern yet protective. Mesopotamian artists created these beings long before Moses received his visions on Mount Sinai. The ancient world knew these winged guardians well. Egyptian sphinxes watched over tombs and temples. Persian art showed winged figures beside sacred trees. When Hebrew scribes described cherubim, they drew from this rich visual language that surrounded them. Yet something new emerged, beings that belonged not to earthly kings, but to the King of Heaven. Early Jewish art remained careful about depicting divine beings. The second commandment warned against graven images, so cherubim appeared mostly in symbolic forms. Synagogue mosaics might show wings or wheels, suggesting the divine chariot without showing the creatures themselves. A beautiful restraint marked these early attempts, presence implied rather than displayed. Byzantine churches changed everything. Golden mosaics filled domes with 6-winged seraphim and 4-faced cherubim. Artists painted them as living fire, their wings covering their faces in holy reverence. These weren't decorations, but windows into heaven itself. Worshippers looked up and saw what Ezekiel saw: the throne room of God made visible in gold and light. Medieval manuscripts brought cherubim to life on parchment pages. Illuminated Bibles showed them in brilliant blues and crimsons, their multiple faces gazing in all directions. Some artists gave them peacock wings, others eagle feathers. Each monastery developed its own vision, yet all captured something of the otherworldly power these beings possessed. Then came a curious transformation. Renaissance artists began painting cherubim as chubby children with tiny wings. These sweet-faced babies, called putti, bore little resemblance to Ezekiel's fearsome four-faced guardians. They decorated ceilings and altarpieces, making the divine seem gentle and approachable. The fierce protectors of Eden became heavenly infants. This shift tells us something profound about how humans picture the divine. When life felt dangerous and uncertain, cherubim appeared as mighty warriors with flaming swords. When Renaissance prosperity brought confidence, they became innocent children. Each age painted its hopes and fears into these heavenly beings. Islamic art took a different path entirely. Avoiding human forms, artists created geometric patterns that suggested divine presence without depicting it. Calligraphy became art, with verses about angels flowing in graceful Arabic script. The cherubim lived in the patterns themselves, in the endless knots and stellar designs that spoke of infinity. Gothic cathedrals carved cherubim into stone, like their faces watching over congregations for centuries. These weren't pretty putty, but serious guardians, weathered by rain and time. They reminded worshippers that divine protection came with divine judgment. Heaven was not only love but also justice, not only mercy but also holiness. Modern art has struggled with cherubim. How do you paint the unpaintable in an age of skepticism? Some artists return to Ezekiel's original vision, creating abstract works of spinning wheels and multiple eyes. Others focus on the emotional truth, the human need for protection and transcendence that cherubim represent. William Blake painted them as beings of pure energy, their forms shifting between human and animal, earthly and divine. His cherubim moved like living flames across the page. Marc Chagall showed them floating through dreamlike landscapes, guardians of memory and hope. These artists understood that cherubim belonged to the realm of vision, not photography. Contemporary sculptors work in metal and light, creating installations that capture something of the cherubim's otherness. Spinning forms with LED eyes, wings that cast shadows like fire. These pieces don't try to show us what cherubim look like, but how they might feel. The sense of standing before something vast and protective and utterly beyond human understanding. The putti persist in popular culture, those round-faced babies appearing on everything from greeting cards to tattoos. They've become symbols of innocence and protection, guardian angels for a secular age. Yet they carry forward something of the original power, the human need to believe in benevolent watchers, in love that guards and protects. Perhaps this evolution of cherubim in art reflects our changing relationship with the divine. Ancient peoples saw God as fearsome and remote, requiring fierce guardians. Medieval Christians emphasized divine majesty, so cherubim appeared as courtly beings of light. Renaissance humanists wanted God to be approachable, so cherubim became childlike. Modern seekers often find God in beauty and mystery, so cherubim become abstract forces of light and motion. The truest artistic representations might be those that maintain the mystery, the shadowy figures in ancient mosaics, half glimpsed through candlelight, the suggestion of wings in architectural curves, the play of light through stained glass that hints at presence without defining it. These invite us into wonder rather than providing easy answers. Artists across cultures and centuries have tried to capture something impossible, the appearance of beings that exist beyond appearance. Each attempt teaches us as much about the artist's time and faith as about the cherubim themselves. In this endless creative struggle, we glimpse the real work of cherubim in human life, not just guarding sacred spaces, but inspiring the sacred imagination that creates art, beauty, and hope. Apocryphal accounts. Beyond the familiar pages of Scripture lie other books, ancient texts that never made it into the biblical canon but carry their own weight of wisdom and wonder. These apocryphal writings speak of cherubim with voices both familiar and strange, adding layers to our understanding of these celestial guardians. The Book of Enoch opens doorways into realms most never see. Here, Enoch walks among angels and witnesses the architecture of heaven itself. The cherubim appear not just as guardians, but as living pillars of God's throne. Their wings beat in rhythm with the cosmic order, and their voices join the eternal song of creation. Each wing beat maintains the balance between earth and sky. In Enoch's vision, cherubim serve as divine secretaries, recording the deeds of humanity in books of fire. They write with fingers of flame on pages that never burn. Every human choice, every act of kindness or cruelty finds its place in their eternal records. These aren't judgmental accountants, but sorrowful witnesses, grieving over human folly while celebrating every glimpse of human goodness. The Book of Jubilees tells a different story of Eden's aftermath. When Adam and Eve left paradise, the cherubim didn't simply guard the gate. They taught the exiled couple how to survive in the harsh world beyond. One cherub showed Adam how to plant and harvest. Another taught Eve the healing properties of herbs. Even in judgment, divine mercy found expression through these mighty beings. This same text reveals that cherubim guided Noah during the great flood, appearing to him in dreams to show where the ark should land. Mount Ararat wasn't chosen randomly, but selected by cherubic wisdom as the perfect place for new beginnings. The dove that returned with an olive branch had been guided by cherubim to find exactly the right symbol of hope. The Testament of Levi opens our eyes to cherubic hierarchies unknown to canonical scripture. 7 orders of cherubim surround the divine throne, each with distinct roles and appearances. The first order burns like white fire, purifying all they touch. The 7th glows like deep gold, carrying the prayers of the faithful directly to God's ears. Between these extremes, 5 other orders maintain the cosmic balance. These texts describe cherubim as teachers of humanity's greatest heroes. Abraham learned mathematics from a cherub named Raziel, who showed him how numbers reflected divine order. Moses received not just the law, but geometric patterns from cherubic instruction, designs that would later inspire the tabernacle's sacred proportions. David's psalms echo melodies first heard in cherubic choirs. The Ascension of Isaiah presents cherubim as guides for souls journeying through heavenly realms. They don't just guard boundaries, but help faithful spirits navigate the 7 heavens. Each cherub knows the passwords and protocols needed to pass from one celestial level to the next. They whisper encouragement to souls overwhelmed by divine glory, offering comfort in the face of infinite mystery. Gnostic texts paint cherubim in more complex colors. Some appear as helpers of the true God, others as agents of the false creator who trapped souls in material bodies. These writings see cherubim caught in cosmic conflict, some loyal to pure spirit, others defending the mixed realm of matter and soul. Even among divine beings, choices must be made. The Book of Adam and Eve describes cherubim showing genuine emotion. When Adam weeps outside Eden's gates, the cherubim weep with him. Their tears fall like stars, creating the first constellations as signs of hope in the night sky. These aren't distant, unmoved guardians, but beings capable of compassion, sharing in human sorrow while maintaining their divine duties. Medieval Jewish mysticism, influenced by these apocryphal traditions, developed elaborate systems of cherubic function. The Sefer Yetzirah describes cherubim as living letters of the Hebrew alphabet, their wings forming the shapes of sacred words. When they move in their cosmic dance, they literally spell out the names of God, creating reality through divine grammar written in light and motion. The Apocalypse of Abraham shows cherubim as cosmic recyclers, taking the ashes of destroyed worlds and breathing them into new stars. Nothing truly dies in their care. Everything transforms, finds new purpose, becomes part of ongoing creation. They serve as guarantees that God wastes nothing, that every ending enables a new beginning. These non-canonical accounts often emphasize cherubic accessibility. While biblical cherubim seem remote and fearsome, apocryphal cherubim engage more directly with human affairs. They appear in dreams to ordinary people, not just prophets. They intervene in daily life, guiding travelers, protecting children, comforting the grieving. The divine doesn't stay locked in temples, but walks among us through cherubic ministry. Some texts describe cherubim learning from their contact with humanity. Eternal beings discover something precious in human mortality. The urgency that comes with limited time, the poignancy of choices that can't be undone. They carry human stories back to heaven, enriching the divine understanding with tales of courage and love born from fragility. The Testament of Solomon reveals cherubim as masters of spiritual technology, beings who understand how invisible forces shape visible reality. They teach humans about the power of sacred geometry, about how certain sounds and symbols can create harmony between earthly and heavenly realms. Their knowledge bridges the gap between mysticism and practical wisdom. These apocryphal accounts remind us that the cherubim story extends far beyond familiar scriptures. In texts preserved by various communities across centuries, we find these beings serving as teachers, comforters, guides, and friends. They remain mighty and mysterious, but they also draw near, sharing in human experience while maintaining their connection to divine transcendence. Perhaps these alternative voices capture something true about cherubim that more formal scriptures couldn't express. Their role as bridges between human and divine experience, guardians who protect not through distance but through love, made manifest in countless acts of hidden guidance and unexpected grace. Temple visions. Close your eyes and step into Solomon's temple as morning light filters through ancient windows. Gold catches the first rays, throwing patterns across walls lined with cedar from Lebanon. Here, cherubim are everywhere, not as distant guardians, but as intimate companions in humanity's closest approach to the divine. The inner sanctuary holds two massive cherubim, each 15 feet tall, carved from olive wood and covered in pure gold. Their wings stretch 20 feet from tip to tip, meeting in the center above the Ark of the Covenant. These aren't decorative figures, but architectural elements of heaven itself, creating a sacred canopy where God chooses to dwell among mortals. Stand beneath those wings and feel the weight of their protection. The space grows quiet in a way that goes beyond mere silence. Here, the high priest enters once each year, carrying the hopes and confessions of an entire nation. The cherubim watch over this most sacred encounter, their golden faces reflecting candlelight like living flames. But the temple's cherubim extend far beyond the Holy of Holies. The walls themselves bloom with carved cherubim intertwined with palm trees and flowering vines. These aren't random decorations, but a return to Eden, where cherubim first appeared among the trees of paradise. The temple becomes a new garden, a place where heaven and earth meet once again. Even the doors bear cherubic forms. As priests and worshippers enter, they pass beneath watchful wings, reminded that they step from ordinary space into holy ground. The cherubim mark thresholds, but their presence blesses the crossing rather than forbidding it. They invite the faithful deeper into mystery. The bronze sea, that enormous basin for ritual washing, rests on 12 bronze oxen facing the 4 directions. These echo the ox faces of Ezekiel's cherubim, suggesting that even practical elements of worship connect to the cosmic order. Priests washing their hands participate in the same divine patterns that govern the movement of stars. Solomon's palace, built alongside the temple, featured cherubim in its decorative program as well. Even royal power acknowledged its place beneath divine authority. The king's throne sat surrounded by cherubic imagery, reminding him that earthly rule serves heavenly purposes. Political power found its meaning in sacred order. The chronicler tells us that skilled craftsmen came from across the known world to create these cherubic forms. Hiram of Tyre brought techniques learned from Phoenician masters. Egyptian influences appeared in wing patterns, Mesopotamian traditions in the joining of human and animal features. The cherubim gathered the artistic wisdom of nations into one sacred synthesis. Ezekiel's later vision of a restored temple shows cherubim continuing their guardianship even after the first temple's destruction. In his prophetic sight, cherubim appear as part of the temple's very structure, their wings forming the columns that support the roof. The building itself becomes a cherub, a living being that houses the divine presence. These temple cherubim served multiple functions beyond mere decoration or symbolism. They acted as spiritual conductors, channeling divine energy throughout the sacred space. Their positions corresponded to cosmic alignments, creating harmony between earthly worship and heavenly order. The temple became an instrument played by divine hands, with cherubim as its living strings. The veil separating the holy place from the Holy of Holies displayed cherubim woven in blue, purple, and scarlet thread. This wasn't simply beautiful fabric, but a barrier that breathed with life. The cherubim seemed to move as the veil swayed, creating the impression of living guardians protecting the sacred mysteries beyond. Incense burned constantly before cherubic images, its smoke rising like prayers made visible. The creatures seemed to breathe in the fragrant offerings, carrying human worship directly to the divine throne. Every grain of frankincense, every wisp of myrrh, passed through cherubic intercession on its way to heaven. The priests who served in this cherub-filled space developed a deep relationship with these golden guardians. Daily rituals took place under their watchful presence. The lighting of lamps, the changing of showbread, the morning and evening sacrifices, all occurred within their protective embrace. They witnessed every act of worship, blessing each sincere offering. When the Babylonians destroyed the temple, they carried away the golden cherubim along with other treasures. Yet something remained. Those who returned from exile spoke of sensing cherubic presence even in the rebuilt temple's simpler spaces. The beings transcended their physical representations, continuing their ministry through faith and memory. Herod's later temple renovation included cherubic elements, though scholars debate their exact appearance. Some sources suggest they were even more elaborate than Solomon's originals, incorporating Greek artistic influences while maintaining Hebrew theological content. The cherubim adapted to new cultural contexts while preserving their essential role. The temple's destruction in 70 CE scattered its cherubic imagery across the world. Fragments appeared in synagogues throughout the diaspora, reminders of the sacred center that no longer existed in physical form. Yet the cherubim found new homes in the hearts of worshippers who carried temple memories wherever they went. Early Christians saw the temple's cherubim as prefiguring their own understanding of divine presence. The veil torn at Jesus' crucifixion revealed what the cherubim had always guarded: direct access to God's mercy. The cherubim didn't disappear but transformed their role, opening rather than guarding the way to divine intimacy. Medieval Jewish mysticism developed elaborate correspondences between the temple's cherubim and the structure of reality itself. Each wing represented a different aspect of divine emanation, each face a different way of understanding God's relationship to creation. The temple became a map of heaven, with cherubim as its living coordinates. Standing in imagination before these ancient cherubim, we sense something beyond historical reconstruction. These beings bridged the gap between human craftsmanship and divine inspiration, between earthly worship and heavenly reality. They transformed stone and gold into windows of wonder, making the invisible God somehow present to human senses. The temple cherubim remind us that the sacred requires embodiment, that spiritual truth seeks material expression. Through human hands, guided by divine vision, gold became worship, craft became prayer, and art became a dwelling place for the Most High. Cherubim and the Fall of Empires. The year is 586 BCE. Babylonian soldiers storm through Jerusalem's streets as flames consume Solomon's temple. In the smoke and chaos, something profound shifts in the heavenly realms. The cherubim who guarded the Holy of Holies must make a choice: stay with their golden forms as they melt in the fire, or depart with the presence of the God they serve. Ezekiel, carried into exile years earlier, sees the answer in a vision that shakes him to his core. The cherubim leave. The glory of the Lord, carried by those four-faced beings, rises from the temple's threshold, pauses over the city's eastern gate, then departs toward Babylon. The guardians follow their master into exile, abandoning the sacred space that no longer honors the sacred name. This departure marks more than military defeat. When cherubim withdraw their protection, kingdoms crumble from within. The spiritual architecture that supported earthly power collapses, leaving only empty rituals and hollow crowns. Babylon conquered Jerusalem's walls, but the cherubim's departure revealed a deeper conquest: the triumph of justice over corrupted worship. Yet the vision continues with unexpected hope. Those same cherubim who departed with divine glory also carry the promise of return. They don't abandon God's people, but accompany them into exile, ensuring that the presence of the Holy One survives even when the holy place lies in ruins. The cherubim prove more portable than temples, more durable than gold. Daniel, serving in Babylon's courts, catches glimpses of cherubic activity behind the scenes of empire. When Nebuchadnezzar's pride leads to madness, when Belshazzar's feast ends in conquest, when kingdoms rise and fall like waves on the shore, cherubim orchestrate these movements according to divine justice. They serve as heaven's foreign policy, ensuring that no earthly power becomes absolute. The pattern repeats throughout history. When Persia conquers Babylon, cherubim guide Cyrus to issue decrees of liberation. When Greece overwhelms Persia, cherubic influence shapes Alexander's surprising tolerance of local religions. When Rome dominates Greece, cherubim work through unlikely figures to preserve the traditions they guard. Empires think they conquer through military might, but cherubim reveal the spiritual forces that actually determine victory and defeat. The return from exile brings cherubim back to Jerusalem, though in subtler forms. The rebuilt temple lacks the golden giants of Solomon's sanctuary, but faithful eyes recognize cherubic presence in the everyday miracles of restoration. Communities reform, traditions revive, hope returns, all signs of cherubic ministry working through human faithfulness. Rome's rise presents new challenges for cherubic guardianship. This empire claims divinity for its Caesars, demanding worship that belongs to God alone. The cherubim, who once guarded Eden against prideful humanity, now stand against prideful empire. Their resistance takes unexpected forms, strengthening persecuted communities, inspiring martyrs, preserving sacred texts through times of suppression. The destruction of Herod's temple in 70 CE repeats the pattern of 586 BCE with variations. Again, cherubim depart before the building falls. Again, their withdrawal signals the end of an era. But this time they scatter in all directions, following the diaspora communities that carry divine presence into every corner of the known world. The temple's destruction becomes the cherubim's liberation. Early Christian communities recognize cherubic activity in their own struggles with imperial power. When Diocletian's persecution reaches its peak, when Constantine's conversion changes everything, when theological controversies threaten to split the church, cherubim work behind the scenes, guarding the essential truths while allowing the accidental forms to change. The fall of Rome brings new configurations of power and new challenges for cherubic ministry. Barbarian invasions scatter old certainties, but cherubim adapt to tribal societies just as they once served temple worship. They inspire Celtic monasteries, guide Viking conversions, preserve classical learning through the Dark Ages. Their guardianship transcends political boundaries. Medieval chroniclers often describe cherubic interventions in crucial battles. At Tours, where Charles Martel stops the Islamic advance into Europe, witnesses report angelic figures fighting alongside Christian forces. At Hastings, where Norman conquest changes English history, both sides claim cherubic visions. The beings who once guarded paradise now guard the cultural boundaries that shape civilization. The Black Death presents cherubim with perhaps their greatest challenge. How do guardians of life respond to mass mortality? Medieval accounts suggest they focus on protecting souls rather than bodies, ensuring that death becomes doorway rather than destination. Plague doctors report seeing winged figures comforting the dying, while survivors speak of dreams where cherubim promise eventual restoration. The Renaissance brings subtle shifts in cherubic activity. As empires become nation-states, as exploration expands horizons, as printing spreads ideas, cherubim adapt their guardianship to new realities. They inspire explorers like Columbus, who claims angelic guidance in his voyages. They protect reformers like Luther, who survives dangers that should have destroyed him. They work through both Catholic and Protestant communities, guarding truth wherever it appears. The Reformation itself reveals cherubic flexibility. While human institutions fracture over theological disputes, cherubim continue their essential work across denominational lines. They guard papal libraries and Protestant printing presses with equal dedication. Their loyalty belongs to divine truth rather than human structures, to spiritual authority rather than earthly hierarchy. Modern empires, Spanish, French, British, American, Soviet, all face the same challenges as their ancient predecessors. When they serve justice and mercy, cherubic influence supports their efforts. When they become proud and oppressive, cherubim withdraw their protection, hastening the collapse that pride makes inevitable. The pattern established in Babylon continues through every age. The 20th century's great conflicts test cherubic ministry in unprecedented ways. Total war, industrial slaughter, systematic genocide. How do guardians of holiness respond to mechanized evil? Survivors of concentration camps report angelic presences preserving sanity and hope in impossible circumstances. Resistance fighters describe supernatural guidance through moments of crucial decision. Today's global civilization faces challenges that transcend individual empires: climate change, nuclear weapons, technological disruption, social fragmentation. The cherubim who once guarded individual nations now work to guard humanity itself. Their protection adapts to planetary scale, their vigilance extends to species survival. The pattern remains constant through all these historical shifts. Cherubim guard what serves divine purposes and withdraw protection from what opposes them. They work through human institutions when possible, around them when necessary. Their loyalty belongs to the kingdom that outlasts all earthly kingdoms, the empire of love that conquers through service rather than force. Every empire eventually discovers what Babylon learned, that ultimate security comes not from military might, but from divine favor, not from conquered territories, but from guarded hearts. The cherubim continue their ancient ministry, protecting what deserves protection while allowing time and change to sweep away what has served its purpose. Early Christian reinterpretation. The first Christians inherited cherubim from Jewish tradition, but found themselves seeing these beings through completely new eyes. When Stephen stood before the Sanhedrin, his face shone like an angel's, and witnesses claimed they glimpsed cherubic forms surrounding him as he proclaimed his vision of the heavens opened. Something fundamental had shifted in how divine guardians related to human experience. Paul, trained in Hebrew scriptures, brought cherubic imagery into his letters without always naming these beings directly. When he spoke of principalities and powers, of thrones and dominions, early readers understood he included the cherubim among heaven's ranked hierarchies. But Paul's cherubim served a crucified Messiah, which changed everything about their relationship to human authority and divine justice. The book of Revelation explodes with cherubic presence, though John calls them living creatures rather than cherubim. Here they appear around the throne of the Lamb, no longer guarding Eden's gate, but opening heaven's doors. They lead the worship of creatures from every tribe and nation, their four faces representing not just cosmic order, but redeemed diversity. The same beings who excluded humanity from paradise now welcome a multitude from every corner of creation. John's vision transforms cherubic function from exclusion to inclusion. These aren't beings who keep people away from God, but creatures who draw them near. Their song, Holy, 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 invites rather than intimidates. Their presence around the throne demonstrates that the barrier between human and divine has been permanently removed through the Lamb's sacrifice. Early Christian art struggled with how to depict these transformed cherubim. Catacomb paintings show winged figures surrounding the Chi-Rho symbol, but they appear gentle rather than fierce, welcoming rather than forbidding. And the flaming sword of Eden becomes the fire of Pentecost, no longer threatening but empowering. Cherubim begin their long evolution from fearsome guardians to messengers of good news. The Church Fathers developed elaborate theologies around cherubic transformation. Origen saw them as patterns of spiritual development, the four faces representing stages of growth in Christian virtue. The ox showed patient service, the lion courageous faith, the eagle contemplative flight toward God, the human face the goal of restored divine image. Cherubim became mentors rather than monitors. John Chrysostom preached passionately about cherubim present in every celebration of the Eucharist. He claimed these beings descended to every altar where bread and wine became body and blood, their wings sheltering the mystery of divine presence in humble elements. The Holy of Holies expanded to include every place where Christians gathered in Jesus' name. Augustine wrestled with cherubic knowledge, wondering how beings of pure intelligence related to human learning. He concluded that cherubim didn't gain knowledge through study, but possessed it through direct participation in divine wisdom. Yet they chose to share this knowledge with humans, becoming teachers rather than hoarding their understanding. The cherubim of Eden who excluded now included humanity in divine education. The Cappadocian Fathers, Basil, Gregory of Nazianzus, Gregory of Nyssa, developed sophisticated pneumatology that included cherubim as agents of the Holy Spirit's work. They saw these beings active in every aspect of Christian experience: inspiration of Scripture, illumination of understanding, sanctification of believers. Cherubim became intimate companions in spiritual growth rather than distant guardians of cosmic order. Early Christian monasticism embraced cherubic imagery in unexpected ways. Desert Fathers reported visions of cherubim during deep prayer, but these weren't terrifying encounters. The beings appeared as gentle guides into contemplative experience, their multiple faces representing the different ways prayer could approach divine mystery. Monastic cells became new Holy of Holies, with cherubim as willing companions in solitude. The development of Christian liturgy incorporated cherubic presence throughout worship. The Sanctus echoed their throne room song. Altar designs suggested their wings. Processional banners bore their images. But unlike temple worship, where only priests approached the cherubim, Christian liturgy invited all believers into their presence. The democratization of access transformed cherubic ministry from exclusive to inclusive. Martyrs' accounts often included cherubic visions, but again with crucial differences from earlier traditions. These beings didn't promise protection from suffering, but companionship through it. They appeared to Stephen, to Polycarp, to Perpetua, and Felicity, not to rescue, but to reassure, not to prevent death, but to promise resurrection. Cherubim became escorts into glory rather than guards against danger. The Arian controversy brought cherubic theology into sharp focus. If Jesus was truly divine, what did that mean for beings who served him? Orthodox Christians insisted that cherubim worshipped the incarnate Son with the same adoration they offered the Father. Arianism reduced cherubim to mere creatures serving a subordinate deity. The cherubic test became a measure of Christological orthodoxy. As Christianity spread beyond Jewish cultural boundaries, cherubim had to adapt to Gentile imagination. Greek philosophical categories influenced their description. They became examples of pure intelligence, of beauty beyond material form, of the harmony that ordered cosmos. Roman administrative concepts shaped their roles. They served as heavenly civil servants in the divine empire of peace. The emergence of Mariology brought new cherubic associations. Early Christians saw Mary as the new Ark of the Covenant, bearing divine presence within her womb. This made cherubim her natural companions, guardians of the incarnation mystery. Byzantine icons often show cherubim surrounding the Theotokos, their wings creating a living throne for the Christ child. The conversion of Constantine raised new questions about cherubic relationship to political power. If the empire became Christian, did cherubim now support imperial authority? Or did their primary loyalty remain with the spiritual kingdom that transcended all earthly realms? The tension between rendering unto Caesar and rendering unto God found expression in competing cherubic theologies. Gnostic Christianity developed alternative cherubic interpretations that Orthodox writers had to address. Some Gnostic texts made cherubim agents of the demiurge, inferior beings who trapped souls in material existence. Orthodox response emphasized cherubic service to the Creator God who declared material creation good. The cherubim's embrace of incarnation became crucial to Orthodox teaching about the goodness of embodied existence. The development of the Christian canon brought cherubic interpretation into scriptural authority. The beings who appeared in Genesis, Exodus, Ezekiel, and Revelation were the same creatures, but their relationship to humanity had been fundamentally transformed by the Christ event. Early Christian exegesis traced this transformation through salvation history, showing how cherubim evolved from exclusion to inclusion, from judgment to mercy, from guardianship to companionship. By the end of the patristic period, Christian cherubim had become something genuinely new while remaining recognizably ancient. They kept their awesome power and cosmic authority, but exercised these in service of redemption rather than restriction. They maintained their role as guardians, but now guarded human access to God rather than preventing it. The flaming sword that once barred paradise had become the fire of love that welcomed all creation home. Medieval mysticism. In the stone cloisters of medieval monasteries, where candlelight danced through winter darkness and monks rose for midnight prayers, cherubim found new expressions in human consciousness. The mystics of these centuries didn't just study these beings, they claimed to encounter them directly, to be taught by them, to be transformed through their presence. Dionysius the Areopagite, writing in the shadows between ancient and medieval worlds, created the celestial hierarchy that would shape Christian angelology for 1,000 years. In his vision, cherubim occupied the highest rank among angels, surpassed only by seraphim in their proximity to divine fire. But Dionysius saw them as more than distant court officials. They were active agents of theosis, helping humans participate in divine nature itself. His cherubim possessed perfect knowledge of God, not as abstract information, but as living participation in divine life. They served as cosmic professors in the University of Heaven, their teaching method involving direct transmission of divine illumination. Human mystics who encountered them reported not learning about God, but experiencing God through cherubic mediation. The monastery of Saint Denis, inspired by Dionysian theology, created worship spaces designed to invoke cherubic presence. Abbot Suger's architectural innovations, pointed arches, flying buttresses, walls of colored glass, aimed to dissolve the boundaries between earthly and heavenly realms. The building itself became a cherub, its stone wings lifting hearts toward divine light. In the scriptorium of medieval monasteries, illuminators painted cherubim with increasing sophistication and daring. The Book of Kells shows them as swirling patterns of color and line that seem to move on the page. The Trerich Her presents them as courtly beings in heavenly palaces. Each artistic interpretation reflected the artist's own mystical understanding, making manuscript illumination a form of theological investigation. Bernard of Clairvaux, the great Cistercian reformer, developed a cherubic spirituality centered on love rather than knowledge. While Dionysius emphasized cherubic intelligence, Bernard focused on their burning love for God. He taught that mystics encountered cherubim, not through intellectual vision, but through the heart's deepest longing for divine union. The cherubim's fire became the flame of mystical love. Hildegard of Bingen experienced visions where cherubim appeared as living mandalas of fire and song. Her writings describe them as cosmic musicians whose wings create melodies that maintain universal harmony. She claimed to hear their music during her prophetic experiences. Here, and some of her own compositions attempt to reproduce these celestial harmonies for earthly voices. The school of Chartres developed a cosmological mysticism where cherubim served as governors of natural law. These scholar mystics saw cherubic influence in the mathematical ratios that govern musical harmony, architectural proportion, and astronomical movement. To study geometry became a form of cherubic contemplation. To contemplate the stars, a way of participating in cherubic worship. Thomas Aquinas brought Aristotelian philosophy into dialogue with cherubic theology, creating systematic angelology that balanced mystical experience with rational analysis. His cherubim possessed perfect intellectual intuition. They understood all truth simultaneously rather than reasoning toward it step by step. Yet they remained accessible to human reason, serving as bridges between divine illumination and human understanding. The German mystics, Meister Eckhart, Johannes Tauler, Heinrich Suso, developed an apophatic cherubic theology that emphasized what couldn't be known rather than what could. Their cherubim dwelt in the divine darkness beyond all concepts and images. Mystical encounter with them involved letting go of all cherished ideas about God, allowing these beings to guide consciousness into the unknowing that surpassed knowledge. Eckhart's cherubim were particularly radical. He claimed they existed in the eternal now, where all temporal distinctions collapsed. To encounter them meant stepping outside time into the eternal present, where all moments existed simultaneously. His controversial teaching that humans could become one with God found expression in claims that advanced mystics could share cherubic consciousness. The Rhineland mystics often reported cherubic visitations during the darkest periods of spiritual development. When human effort reached its limits, when prayer became impossible, when God seemed utterly absent, then cherubim appeared as companions in desolation. They didn't end the darkness, but shared it, transforming spiritual night into pregnant silence where new life could gestate. Richard of St. Victor developed a Trinitarian mysticism where cherubim represented the dynamic love relationships within the Godhead. He saw them as living demonstrations of how perfect love required both unity and distinction, how true intimacy preserved rather than destroyed individual identity. Cherubic encounters taught mystics how to love without possessing, how to unite without merging. The Franciscan tradition brought cherubim down from philosophical heights into the world of creation spirituality. Francis himself claimed no direct cherubic visions, but his followers saw these beings active in every sunset, every flower, every creature, great and small. Bonaventure developed a mystical theology where cherubim guided souls through the stages of illumination found in contemplating the natural world. Dominican spirituality approached cherubim through the life of mind sanctified by grace. Albert the Great studied their role in cosmic intelligence, while Thomas's students developed devotional practices based on cherubic contemplation. The Dominicans created a scholarly mysticism where academic study became a form of prayer, where library research opened doors to cherubic instruction. The Beguines, lay women living in semi-monastic communities, developed an intensely personal cherubic spirituality. Mechtild of Magdeburg wrote of cherubim as divine lovers who courted human souls with passionate tenderness. Marguerite Porete described cherubic annihilation, the mystical death where human will dissolved into divine will through cherubic mediation. Medieval Jewish mysticism, developing parallel to Christian traditions, created elaborate systems of cherubic function. The Sefer HaBahir described cherubim as living vessels of divine emanation, their four faces corresponding to the four worlds of Kabbalistic cosmology. The Zohar presented them as guardians of the divine name, their wings forming the letters of sacred words. Islamic mysticism also developed sophisticated cherubic theologies. Sufi masters spoke of cherubim as models of perfect surrender, beings whose every breath praised Allah. Ibn Arabi saw them as divine self-disclosures, ways the infinite revealed itself to finite consciousness. Their multiplicity and unity demonstrated how the many could exist within the one without contradiction. The plague years brought darker cherubic visions. Mystics reported seeing these beings as psychomps, guides for souls departing earthly life. But even in this role, they appeared as comforters rather than judges, shepherds leading flocks to divine pastures rather than executioners wielding swords of wrath. Death became doorway rather than destination under cherubic escort. Gothic cathedrals served as textbooks of cherubic theology written in stone and glass. Every portal, every capital, every rose window contained cherubic imagery designed to educate the faithful in celestial hierarchies. These weren't mere decorations, but pedagogical tools, ways of making invisible realities visible to eyes of faith. The mystics often described cherubic teaching methods as completely unlike human education. These beings didn't convey information, but transmitted direct experience. They didn't explain divine truth, but immersed students in divine reality. Learning from cherubim meant being transformed rather than simply informed, becoming rather than merely knowing. Female mystics often reported more intimate cherubic relationships than their male counterparts. Julian of Norwich described cherubim as cosmic mothers, nurturing souls in divine love. Catherine of Siena claimed cherubic guidance in her political missions, these beings serving as heavenly diplomats in earthly conflicts. The feminine mystical tradition emphasized cherubic tenderness alongside their awesome power. The later medieval period saw increasing attempts to systematize cherubic encounters through formal mystical theology. Ramon Llull created logical machines designed to analyze cherubic attributes. The Devotio Moderna developed practical exercises for cherubic contemplation. Mystical experience began its slow transformation from spontaneous gift to cultivated discipline. Medieval art evolved sophisticated visual languages for representing cherubic consciousness. Byzantine icons showed them as abstract patterns of light and color. Romanesque sculpture presented them as fantastic creatures bridging human and animal worlds. Gothic art emphasized their architectural function as living supports for heaven's weight. The medieval synthesis of cherubic mysticism achieved something unprecedented in human history, the creation of entire cultures oriented toward mystical experience of divine beings. Monastic communities, cathedral schools, university programs, artistic workshops, and political institutions all acknowledged cherubic presence as fundamental to reality itself. Yet this synthesis carried its own dangers. The institutionalization of mystical experience sometimes reduced living encounter to dead formula. The systematization of cherubic theology occasionally replaced direct vision with secondhand description. The medieval mystics themselves warned against confusing maps with territories, concepts with realities. The greatest medieval mystics maintained healthy skepticism about their own experiences. They tested cherubic visions against scripture, tradition, and reason. They sought spiritual direction from wise elders. They remained open to correction and growth. Their humility paradoxically enabled deeper access to cherubic mystery than pride or presumption could achieve. As medieval civilization reached its zenith in the 13th century, cherubic mysticism permeated every aspect of cultural life. These beings appeared in philosophical treatises and popular songs, in cathedral architecture and kitchen prayers, in royal ceremonies and peasant festivals. The boundary between sacred and secular dissolved under cherubic influence. The decline of medieval synthesis began when mystical experience became separated from intellectual understanding, when cherubic encounter was relegated to private devotion rather than public culture. The beings who had once unified heaven and earth, reason and revelation, individual and community, gradually retreated to the margins of human consciousness. Yet the medieval achievement endures. In moments of deep prayer, in encounters with natural beauty, in experiences of overwhelming love or transcendent truth, something of the medieval cherubic consciousness resurfaces. These beings continue their ancient ministry, waiting for human hearts ready to receive their instruction in the art of divine participation. Paradise Lost and Found. John Milton's epic poem opens with Satan's rebellion, but its deepest tragedy unfolds in the garden where cherubim first appeared in human imagination. Here, in Paradise Lost, these ancient guardians face their greatest test, watching over creatures made in God's image who possess the terrible freedom to choose their own destruction. Milton's cherubim aren't merely biblical quotations brought to poetic life. They breathe with psychological complexity, torn between their loyalty to divine commands and their growing affection for the humans they're assigned to protect. When Adam and Eve walk in Eden's cool evening air, cherubim walk with them, invisible companions in paradise's daily rhythms. The poet presents these beings as witnesses to innocence, observers of human love before it knew shame or possessiveness. They watch Adam name the animals, each word creating new reality through divine delegation. They observe Eve's first glimpse of her reflection in paradise's streams, beauty discovering itself through wonder rather than vanity. These moments of pure delight become treasured memories for beings who live in eternity. But cherubim also sense the approaching catastrophe that human freedom makes possible. They know of Satan's infiltration, his poisonous whispers, his masterful manipulation of desire and pride, yet they cannot intervene without violating the very freedom that makes humans capable of love. Their protection must respect human choice, even when that choice leads to disaster. Milton's genius appears in his portrayal of cherubic grief. When Eve reaches for the forbidden fruit, when Adam chooses solidarity with his beloved over obedience to his creator, the cherubim experience something like heartbreak. They've invested their love in creatures who choose destruction, their hope in beings who prefer illusion to truth. The expulsion scene reveals cherubic mercy within judgment. The flaming sword they wield burns with sorrow as much as anger. They escort rather than drive the human pair from paradise, their presence ensuring that even in exile, divine love remains accessible. The sword that excludes also protects, preventing Adam and Eve from eating from the tree of life while still corrupted by their rebellion. Other poets found different truths in cherubic imagery. Dante's Divine Comedy shows cherubim as living flames in paradise's highest spheres, beings whose love burns so purely they become indistinguishable from the light itself. His cherubim don't guard boundaries, but guide pilgrims through the stages of spiritual ascent, their fire transforming rather than consuming human hearts. William Blake reimagined cherubim as symbols of imagination itself, divine creativity active in human consciousness. His songs of innocence and experience present them as protectors of childhood wonder, beings who preserve the capacity for vision in a world growing increasingly mechanical and cold. Blake's cherubim appear wherever humans create art, tell stories, or dream of better worlds. The Romantic poets found cherubim in nature's sublime moments. Wordsworth glimpsed them in mountain mists and sunset clouds. Coleridge heard their voices in wind harps and ocean waves. These weren't supernatural beings, but natural phenomena revealing supernatural truth, creation's own testimony to the presence that fills and transcends all finite forms. American transcendentalists like Emerson and Thoreau discovered cherubic presence in wilderness solitude. Their cherubim weren't court officials in heaven's bureaucracy, but free spirits inhabiting forests and prairies, beings who taught humans how to live in harmony with natural law. Walden Pond became a new Eden where cherubim still walked with those who had eyes to see. Victorian poetry struggled with cherubim in an age of scientific materialism. Tennyson's In Memoriam wrestles with angelic presence in a universe governed by natural selection. Browning found them in human love's capacity to transcend mortality. Hopkins discovered them in the natural world's intricate beauty, charged with the grandeur of God and protected by beings of fire. The 20th century brought darker cherubic visions. Yeats saw them as symbols of a civilization's spiritual exhaustion. The center cannot hold when cherubic presence withdraws from human culture. Eliot's Wasteland presents a world abandoned by its guardians, where humans wander in spiritual desert while cherubim wait for hearts ready to receive their ministry. World War I challenged poetic imagination to find cherubic presence in mechanized slaughter. Wilfred Owen's poetry suggests that cherubim weep over battlefields, their tears falling as poison gas and artillery shells. Siegfried Sassoon glimpsed them in moments of unexpected tenderness between enemies, brief eruptions of humanity amid inhumane destruction. Modernist poets like T.S. Eliot and W.H. Auden rediscovered cherubim as symbols of transcendence breaking into ordinary life. Four Quartets presents them as guardians of mystical moments when time touches eternity. Auden's later religious poetry shows them active in the mundane details of daily existence, sanctifying the secular through their invisible presence. Contemporary poetry continues the cherubic tradition in surprising directions. Mary Oliver finds them in Wild Geese and Summer Storms, beings who teach humans how to pay attention to the world's beauty. Seamus Heaney discovers them in childhood memories of Irish landscapes, guardians of cultural identity in times of rapid change. Science fiction writers have created new cherubic mythologies for technological ages. Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End presents alien beings who fulfill ancient cherubic functions in cosmic evolution. Isaac Asimov's Foundation series features guardian entities who protect human civilization across galactic time. These modern cherubim adapt ancient roles to interstellar contexts. Fantasy literature has embraced cherubim as characters in epic narratives. Tolkien's eagles serve cherubic functions in Middle-earth, appearing at crucial moments to rescue heroes from impossible situations. C.S. Lewis places cherubim-like beings throughout Narnia, guardians who appear as ordinary animals to those who lack eyes of faith. Children's literature has created gentler cherubic figures for young imaginations. Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are transforms cherubim into playmates who help children process difficult emotions. Lingle's A Wrinkle in Time presents cherubim as cosmic teachers who guide young heroes through the universe's mysteries. The graphic novel medium has produced visually stunning cherubic interpretations. Neil Gaiman's Sandman series presents them as archetypal forces shaping human dreams and nightmares. Art Spiegelman's Moss finds cherubic presence in Holocaust survival stories, beings who preserve hope in humanity's darkest hours. Popular music has carried cherubic imagery into mass culture. Gospel traditions sing of cherubim and seraphim in heavenly choirs. Folk ballads tell stories of angelic visitations in rural communities. Rock musicians invoke cherubic protection against the demons of fame and addiction. Cinema has struggled to represent beings of pure spirit in visual media. The best films suggest rather than show cherubic presence through lighting, music, the actors' expressions, the sudden shift in atmosphere when the sacred breaks into ordinary life. Wings of Desire presents invisible guardians watching over human loneliness with infinite compassion. All these artistic interpretations share common themes that connect them to ancient sources. Cherubim remain guardians of what's most precious in human experience: innocence, love, creativity, hope, the capacity for transcendence. They appear wherever humans encounter beauty, truth, or goodness in forms that transform rather than merely entertain. The literary tradition reveals something crucial about cherubic ministry. These beings don't impose themselves on human consciousness, but wait to be invited, recognized, celebrated through human creativity. They become visible through human imagination, sanctified by love, accessible through human words, animated by truth. Paradise may be lost in historical terms, but it remains findable through artistic vision that recognizes cherubic presence in present experience. Every genuine poem, every authentic story, every truthful song becomes a small recovery of Eden, where cherubim still walk with humans in the cool of day, still guard the trees of life that grow in every heart, ready to receive their protection. Cherubim in Islam. In the pre-dawn hours of Islamic prayer, when faithful voices rise in harmonious recitation across the world, cherubim join their voices to the cosmic symphony that began before time itself. Islamic tradition knows these beings as Cherubim, carriers of the divine throne, guardians of sacred mysteries that transcend the boundaries between Abrahamic faiths. The Quran speaks of beings who bear Allah's throne, described as having wings. Some accounts suggest 4, others 8, still others countless numbers that span the heavens. These throne bearers share essential characteristics with biblical cherubim while expressing unique aspects of Islamic understanding about divine sovereignty and cosmic order. Islamic angelology presents a rich hierarchy where cherubim occupy exalted positions as guardians of divine presence. Unlike the biblical account where they exclude humanity from paradise, Islamic cherubim serve as intercessors who carry human prayers to Allah's throne. They transform exclusion into inclusion, barriers into bridges, separation into connection. The Prophet Muhammad's night journey, the Isra and Miraj, brought him into direct contact with cherubic beings during his ascent through 7 heavens. Traditional accounts describe these encounters with reverent restraint, emphasizing the overwhelming beauty and power of beings whose very existence testifies to Allah's creative majesty. The Prophet's experience provides the template for Islamic mystical encounter with these celestial guardians. Sufi tradition has developed elaborate teachings about cherubic consciousness and its relationship to human spiritual development. The great master Ibn Arabi described cherubim as perfect mirrors reflecting divine names and qualities without distortion. They demonstrate complete surrender, fana, where individual will dissolves into divine will without losing essential identity. The 4 faces of cherubim receive distinctive interpretation in Islamic thought. The human face represents the perfect human being, al-insan al-kamil, who serves as khalifa or divine representative on earth. The lion symbolizes divine strength and courage needed to face spiritual challenges. The ox embodies patient service and sacrifice in Allah's path. The eagle soars toward divine transcendence while remaining connected to earthly responsibility. Islamic art has created sublime expressions of cherubic presence without depicting these beings directly. Geometric patterns in mosque decoration reflect the mathematical precision of cherubic order. Calligraphy transforms Quranic verses about angels into visual prayers that invoke their protective presence. The absence of figurative representation paradoxically makes their spiritual presence more rather than less tangible. The tradition of dhikr, remembrance of Allah, often includes cherubic invocation. Sufi orders have developed specific practices where practitioners align their consciousness with cherubic consciousness, joining the eternal praise that flows from throne bearers to Allah's essence. These practices create mystical union between human and angelic awareness. Islamic scholarship has produced detailed studies of cherubic function in cosmic maintenance. These beings don't merely guard divine presence, but actively sustain the universe through their constant praise and service. Their wings support not only Allah's throne, but the entire structure of reality. Without their ministry, creation itself would collapse into non-existence. The Day of Judgment features cherubim in crucial roles as witnesses to human deeds and agents of divine justice. Unlike punitive judges, they appear as compassionate advocates who intercede for souls seeking divine mercy. Their presence at judgment demonstrates that justice and mercy unite in divine character, rather than conflicting with each other. Quranic commentary has explored the relationship between cherubim and human spiritual potential. Some scholars suggest that elevated human souls can achieve cherubic consciousness through complete surrender to Allah's will. This doesn't make humans into angels, but allows human consciousness to participate in cherubic awareness of divine unity. The tradition of Islamic dream interpretation includes extensive material about cherubic appearances in sleep visions. These beings often appear to seekers during spiritual crises, offering guidance through symbolic actions rather than direct speech. Their presence in dreams signals divine invitation to deeper levels of surrender and trust. Medieval Islamic philosophy, particularly the work of Al-Ghazali and his successors, developed sophisticated theories about cherubic knowledge and its relationship to human reason. These beings possess direct intuitive knowledge of divine truth, while humans must work through rational processes to approach the same understanding. Yet, cherubim serve as teachers who help human reason transcend its limitations. The practice of Islamic pilgrimage, Hajj, includes cherubic dimensions often overlooked by casual observers. Pilgrims circling the Kaaba participate in earthly reflection of cherubic praise around Allah's throne. The ritual movements mirror celestial liturgy, connecting human worship to cosmic worship that never ceases. Islamic mystical poetry, especially in Persian and Arabic traditions, frequently invokes cherubic imagery to describe states of spiritual intoxication and union with the divine. Rumi's verses speak of cherubim as cosmic dancers whose movements create the rhythms that govern planetary motion and human heartbeats alike. The concept of barakah, divine blessing, often flows through cherubic mediation in Islamic understanding. These beings carry divine grace from its source to human recipients, serving as celestial postal workers in the economy of spiritual gift-giving. Their presence sanctifies space and time, making the ordinary capable of bearing extraordinary meaning. Islamic theological debates about free will and predestination often reference cherubic existence as models of perfect freedom achieved through complete submission. These beings aren't coerced into obedience, but choose surrender so completely that their will becomes identical with divine will. They demonstrate that true freedom comes through alignment with ultimate reality rather than opposition to it. The tradition of Islamic architecture incorporates cherubic principles in the design of sacred spaces. Domes represent the cosmic egg protected by cherubic wings. Minarets reach toward heavenly realms where these beings dwell. Mihrab niches orient worshippers toward the divine presence that cherubim eternally serve. Contemporary Islamic spirituality continues to find relevance in cherubic teachings for modern challenges. Environmental movements within Islam invoke cherubic responsibility for cosmic maintenance as a model for human stewardship of creation. Peace activists point to cherubic harmony as a template for resolving conflicts between communities and nations. The interfaith dialogue between Islam, Christianity, and Judaism often finds common ground in shared cherubic traditions. These beings serve as bridges between traditions that sometimes emphasize their differences over their similarities. Cherubim belong to no single faith but serve the one God worshipped by all three Abrahamic religions. Islamic feminist theology has explored the significance of cherubic beings who transcend gender categories while embodying both protective and nurturing qualities traditionally associated with feminine and masculine principles. These beings model spiritual wholeness that integrates all aspects of divine character without reducing them to human gender constructs. The global Muslim community's daily prayers, performed 5 times across all time zones, creates a continuous wave of worship that circles the earth constantly. Islamic tradition teaches that cherubim join this perpetual prayer, their voices blending with human voices to create a symphony of praise that never stops, never falters, never grows weary of celebrating the divine mystery that creates, sustains, and ultimately redeems all existence. This Islamic understanding of cherubim emphasizes their accessibility rather than their distance, their service rather than their power, their invitation rather than their exclusion. They remain awesome beings worthy of profound reverence, but they use their awesome nature to serve rather than to intimidate, to include rather than to exclude, to bridge the gap between human aspiration and divine reality. Modern echoes walk through any contemporary city and you'll find cherubim hiding in unexpected places. They appear as winged victory statues on government buildings, guardian angels in cemetery sculptures, abstract forms in modern art installations. The ancient protectors have adapted to urban landscapes while maintaining their essential function as bridges between human and divine experience. Popular culture has transformed cherubim into guardian angels, benevolent beings who protect individuals rather than cosmic boundaries. This shift reflects modern emphasis on personal spirituality over institutional religion, individual relationship with the divine rather than communal worship. Television shows like Touched by an Angel present cherubim like beings as friendly helpers rather than awesome guardians of holiness. New Age spirituality has embraced cherubic imagery while adapting it to contemporary spiritual seeking. Angel cards and crystal healing often invoke cherubic protection for meditation and personal growth. These practices may lack theological sophistication, but they demonstrate persistent human need for connection with benevolent forces beyond ordinary reality. The self-help movement has created secular versions of cherubic ministry. Life coaches and motivational speakers often describe inner guidance that sounds remarkably like traditional accounts of angelic inspiration. Corporate leadership training teaches executives to trust intuition in ways that echo mystical traditions of cherubic instruction. Science fiction has given cherubim new forms suitable for technological ages. Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End presents alien beings who serve cherubic functions in human evolution toward cosmic consciousness. These modern cherubim use advanced technology rather than supernatural power, but they maintain the essential role of guiding humanity toward transcendent destiny. Video games and fantasy literature have created interactive cherubic experiences. Players can summon angelic allies, receive cherubic guidance, or even play as cherubim protecting virtual worlds. These digital environments allow modern audiences to experience cherubic ministry in participatory ways that passive reading or viewing cannot provide. Therapeutic practices increasingly recognize something like cherubic presence in healing relationships. Jungian psychology speaks of archetypal guardians that emerge during psychological integration. Trauma therapy acknowledges protective figures that appear in survivor narratives. While secularized, these approaches echo ancient understanding of cherubic healing ministry. Environmental movements have discovered cherubic themes in their advocacy for planetary protection. Earth becomes the new Eden, requiring guardianship against human destructiveness. Activists speak of responsibility to protect creation in language that echoes cherubic ministry, though they may not recognize the theological roots of their calling. The conspiracy theory community has created dark cherubic mythologies where these beings serve secret global powers rather than divine purposes. These distorted versions reveal both persistent human fascination with supernatural authority and deep suspicion of hidden control. Even in paranoid form, cherubic imagery continues to shape contemporary imagination. Artificial intelligence research inadvertently explores cherubic characteristics in attempts to create benevolent superintelligence. AI safety researchers worry about creating systems with cherubic power, but without cherubic wisdom or goodness. Their concerns echo ancient questions about how mighty beings can serve rather than dominate, protect rather than control. Social media has created new forms of cherubic community. Online prayer circles invoke angelic protection for strangers across the globe. Grief support groups share stories of cherubic comfort during loss and tragedy. Digital platforms enable cherubic ministry through human networks connected by shared compassion and concern. Mental health advocacy increasingly recognizes spiritual dimensions of psychological well-being. Therapists trained in religious counseling acknowledge cherubic presence in client experiences without imposing specific theological interpretations. This integration of psychological and spiritual care echoes traditional understanding of cherubim as healers of the whole person. Musicians across genres continue to invoke cherubic imagery in songs about protection, guidance, and transcendence. Hip-hop artists rap about guardian angels watching over dangerous neighborhoods. Country singers tell stories of cherubic intervention in times of crisis. Electronic composers create ambient soundscapes that evoke cherubic presence through pure sound. The tattoo industry has made cherubic imagery accessible to popular culture in permanent form. Memorial tattoos often feature cherubic wings or faces to honor deceased loved ones. Protection tattoos invoke cherubic guardianship for dangerous occupations or life transitions. These modern markings serve functions similar to ancient amulets and sacred jewelry. Documentary filmmaking has explored cherubic presence in contemporary spiritual communities. Films about near-death experiences often feature accounts of cherubic encounters during clinical death. Studies of spontaneous mystical experience include modern reports of cherubic visitation that echo ancient texts with remarkable consistency. Medical professionals increasingly acknowledge spiritual dimensions of healing that sound like cherubic ministry. Nurses report sensing unseen presences during critical patient care. Surgeons describe moments of extraordinary skill that feel like divine guidance. Hospice workers witness peaceful deaths, accompanied by phenomena suggesting cherubic escort to whatever lies beyond. The recovery movement has found cherubic resources for addiction treatment. 12-step programs encourage surrender to higher power that often manifests through cherubic-like guidance. Sponsors serve cherubic functions as experienced guides who protect newcomers through early sobriety. Group meetings become sacred spaces where cherubic presence supports healing community. Disaster response reveals cherubic ministry through human heroism. First responders often describe supernatural strength and courage during rescue operations. Disaster survivors report protective experiences that defy natural explanation. Relief workers discover renewal and purpose that sustains them through overwhelming need and suffering. The space program has created new contexts for cherubic contemplation. Astronauts frequently report spiritual experiences while viewing Earth from space. The overview effect, seeing planetary unity from cosmic perspective, echoes traditional accounts of cherubic vision that transcends earthly boundaries and divisions. Climate change activism has developed cherubic dimensions as people respond to planetary crisis with protective care that transcends self-interest. Environmental protesters risk personal safety to guard forests and waterways. Scientists dedicate careers to understanding and communicating threats to global systems. Their motivation often includes spiritual elements that sound like cherubic calling. Interfaith dialogue increasingly recognizes cherubic presence across religious boundaries. Jewish, Christian, and Islamic communities discover shared cherubic traditions that unite them despite theological differences. Buddhist and Hindu practitioners identify similar guardian beings in their own traditions. These discoveries suggest universal human recognition of protective spiritual forces. The wellness industry has commercialized cherubic imagery in ways both inspiring and troubling. Angel therapy and crystal healing may trivialize ancient wisdom, but they also demonstrate persistent human hunger for connection with benevolent forces beyond ordinary reality. Even commercialized spirituality preserves something of traditional cherubic function. Online religious communities have created new forms of cherubic ministry. Prayer request websites connect strangers in mutual intercession. Meditation apps guide users through cherubic visualization practices. Virtual reality environments allow immersive spiritual experiences that can include cherubic encounters designed for contemporary seekers. The pandemic years revealed cherubic ministry through healthcare workers who risked their lives caring for strangers. Their dedication transcended professional duty, expressing something like cherubic love that serves without counting cost. Essential workers maintained civilization's basic functions with devotion that echoed cherubic faithfulness to cosmic order. These modern echoes suggest that cherubim haven't disappeared from human experience, but have adapted to contemporary forms and contexts. They continue their ancient ministry of protection, guidance, and bridge building between human and divine realms. Their presence may be less obvious in secular cultures, but their function remains as necessary as ever for human well-being and spiritual growth. The challenge for contemporary seekers lies in recognizing authentic cherubic presence amid the noise of commercialized spirituality and cultural distortion. True cherubim serve rather than demand, protect rather than control, guide rather than coerce. They appear wherever genuine love transcends self-interest, wherever protection extends to the vulnerable, wherever beauty and truth inspire human hearts toward transcendent reality. The stillness of wings. In the deepest chamber of Solomon's temple, where no sound penetrated except the whisper of divine presence, 2 golden cherubim spread their wings above the Ark of the Covenant. Their wingtips touched in the center, creating a space of perfect stillness where heaven met earth in silent communion. This stillness wasn't empty silence, but pregnant quiet, like the pause between musical notes that gives them meaning. Here, in the shadow of cherubic wings, the most profound conversations happened without words. The high priest entered once each year into this silence, carrying the names of 12 tribes written on precious stones close to his heart. Imagine standing in that space, feeling the weight of those golden wings overhead. The cherubim don't move, don't speak, don't demand attention. Their ministry happens through pure presence, through the quality of being that transforms ordinary space into holy ground. They teach the deepest spiritual lesson, that the most powerful action sometimes looks like perfect stillness. The ark beneath their wings contained broken stone tablets alongside perfect ones, manna that fed wandering generations, Aaron's rod that budded with new life. These objects told the story of human failure and divine faithfulness, of law broken and grace given, of wilderness wandering and promised rest. The cherubim guarded not perfection, but the mystery of love that works through imperfection. Their faces looked toward each other and downward toward the mercy seat, demonstrating the proper direction of spiritual attention. Not upward in spiritual pride or outward in anxious activity, but toward the place where mercy flows and toward the companion who shares the watch. They model the contemplative life that finds God in relationship and presence rather than achievement and motion. The silence between their wings speaks volumes about divine character. God doesn't need to shout to be heard, doesn't need to force attention to be noticed, doesn't need to move constantly to remain present. The cherubim's stillness reflects divine confidence. It's the certainty of being that doesn't require constant proof or validation. Modern life struggles with this cherubic stillness. Our world rewards movement, noise, productivity, constant stimulation. The idea of guardian beings who serve primarily through being rather than doing challenges contemporary assumptions about value and effectiveness. Yet their ancient witness suggests that presence itself can be the most powerful form of ministry. In meditation traditions across cultures, practitioners seek the stillness that cherubic wings create. Buddhist monks sit in motionless attention, Christian contemplatives rest in wordless prayer, Sufi mystics whirl into stillness at their dance's center. All seek the place where external motion ceases and inner awareness awakens to presence beyond activity. The cherubim's golden forms reflected candlelight in the temple's darkness, creating the illusion of gentle movement without actual motion. This interplay of light and gold, stillness and apparent life captures something essential about divine presence. Always moving yet never changing, always active yet perfectly at rest. Their protection doesn't require weapons or threats because it flows from the quality of space they create. Under cherubic wings, nothing false can survive, not because it's attacked, but because it's unnecessary. Truth's presence simply dissolves illusion. Love's reality makes fear irrelevant. Beauty's actuality renders ugliness impossible. Consider the mercy seat between their wings, the caporet where divine presence chose to dwell among mortals. This wasn't a throne of judgment, but a place of meeting. Not a seat of power, but a space of relationship. The cherubim created a sanctuary for intimacy rather than a court for sentencing. Their stillness invited approach rather than inspiring flight. The high priest who entered this space once yearly couldn't rush through his duties. The cherubic presence demanded deliberation, reverence, attention to every gesture and word. Their stillness slowed him down, created space for awareness, insisted on presence rather than performance. They taught him to be before trying to do. When the temple was destroyed and the cherubim carried away or melted down, their true ministry didn't end, but began a new phase. No longer confined to one building, their stillness became available wherever humans created spaces for quiet attention. Every prayer closet, every meditation cushion, every moment of genuine presence becomes a place where cherubic wings spread over seeking hearts. The inner life requires this cherubic stillness for healthy development. Without regular refuge and quiet presence, the soul becomes scattered, anxious, driven by external pressures rather than guided by inner wisdom. The cherubim offer their wings as shelter where the heart can rest, remember its deepest identity, reconnect with its eternal source. Their four faces, human, lion, ox, eagle, remain perfectly still, yet somehow alive with expression. This paradox suggests that true vitality doesn't require constant motion, but flows from depth of being. The most alive people often appear calmest, the wisest teachers speak least. The greatest leaders seem to do nothing, while everything necessary happens around them. In our age of digital distraction and manufactured urgency, cherubic stillness becomes more precious than gold. The ability to be fully present, to rest in awareness without needing entertainment, to find fulfillment in being rather than having. These capacities require protection from the forces that fragment attention and scatter focus. The space between cherubic wings offers refuge for contemplation of mystery. Here, questions don't demand immediate answers, problems don't require instant solutions, conflicts don't need immediate resolution. The cherubim create breathing room where wisdom can emerge naturally, where truth can reveal itself in its own time, where love can work through patience rather than pressure. Their eternal watchfulness doesn't stem from anxiety or vigilance born of fear. They remain alert from love, attentive from care, present from choice rather than compulsion. Their watching creates safety rather than surveillance, freedom rather than restriction, invitation rather than intimidation. The mercy seat between their wings becomes available in every moment of genuine forgiveness. When humans release grievances, when communities choose reconciliation over revenge, when nations prefer peace to victory. Wherever mercy flows, cherubic wings spread to protect the tender space where healing happens. As this long story of cherubim draws toward its close, we return to where it began, in the silence that precedes speech, the stillness that enables motion, the presence that makes all action meaningful. The cherubim who excluded humans from one tree of life now spread their wings over every heart, ready to receive the life that fear cannot touch, death cannot destroy, time cannot diminish. In the end, cherubim teach the most important lesson any guardian can offer, that the thing most worth protecting is the capacity for presence itself, the ability to be fully here in this moment, aware and awake and available to the mystery that surrounds and fills all existence. Under their wings, every human heart discovers its divine identity. Every seeking soul finds its eternal home. Every broken life experiences the healing that comes through grace's gentle presence. The stillness of their wings covers everything that needs protection, holds everything that requires healing, blesses everything that seeks its true identity in the love that created all things and calls them good. In this stillness, the ancient story finds its fulfillment, and every new story discovers its beginning.